When Savannah Hayes made that desperate call from her sister's wedding in Rome, the sister who stole her fiancé because she fit better in a size 2 dress, she never imagined Adrian Cross would actually come. But 8 hours later, the most dangerous man she'd ever met walked into that ballroom like he owned it, silenced the room with one look, and carried her out in front of everyone who'd spent years making her feel invisible. That single moment changed everything. Now, 1 year later, she's about to discover that escaping humiliation was just the beginning, and loving a man like Adrian comes with a price no one warned her about. If you want to see how far a single phone call can take you, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The champagne was Dom Perignon. The flowers were imported from the Netherlands. The dress, custom Vera Wang of course, fit Emily Hayes like it had been painted onto her slender frame. Everything about the wedding screamed perfection, from the Renaissance palazzo overlooking the Tiber to the string quartet playing something achingly romantic in the corner. And Savannah Hayes stood in the middle of it all, feeling like she was drowning. Can you believe this view? A distant cousin, third or fourth, Savannah couldn't remember, sidled up beside her, Prosecco in hand. Emily really outdid herself. Then again, she always does, doesn't she? The words landed like a carefully aimed knife between Savannah's ribs. She forced her lips into something resembling a smile. She does. And Marcus looks absolutely smitten. They're just perfect together, don't you think? Perfect. That word again. It had followed Savannah her entire life. Always just out of reach. Always belonging to someone else. Usually Emily. "Excuse me," Savannah murmured, setting down her untouched champagne flute. "I need some air." She didn't wait for a response. The palazzo had a dozen terraces, balconies, and garden walkways, and Savannah had memorized every one of them over the past 3 days. She needed somewhere she could breathe without someone commenting on how brave she was for coming, or how gracious she'd been about the whole situation. The whole situation. As if her younger sister marrying Savannah's ex-fiancé was just some minor social inconvenience, like a seating chart mix-up or a delayed flight. Savannah found a small stone balcony overlooking the gardens, blessedly empty. She pressed her hands against the cool marble railing and closed her eyes, trying to remember the breathing exercises her therapist had taught her. In for 4. Hold for 7. Out for 8. It didn't help. 2 years. She'd been engaged to Marcus Calloway for 2 years. They'd picked out china patterns. They'd toured venues in Connecticut and the Hamptons. She'd helped him prepare for the biggest presentation of his career at his father's investment firm, had stayed up until 3 in the morning making sure every slide was perfect. And then Emily had come home from her semester abroad in Paris. Savannah should have seen it coming. Emily, with her effortless elegance and her size 2 frame, and her way of making every room feel like it had been waiting for her to arrive. Emily, who had never struggled with anything in her entire charmed life. Marcus had tried to be discreet about it. Savannah would give him that much. He'd waited almost 3 months before sitting her down in their favorite restaurant, their restaurant, the one where he'd proposed, and explaining that he'd developed feelings for Emily. "It's not about you," he'd said, reaching across the table like he actually expected her to take his hand. "You're wonderful, Savannah. You're smart and funny and not Emily," she'd finished for him. He'd had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It's complicated." "Is it? Because it seems pretty simple to me. You decided you'd rather be with my sister." "My family thinks—" He'd stopped himself, but not quickly enough. Savannah had felt something crack open inside her chest. "Your family thinks what, Marcus?" "They think Emily would be a better fit for the kind of life we're building. The charity galas, the board dinners, He'd gestured vaguely. "You know how image-conscious they are." Image. The word had hung between them like a guillotine blade. She'd understood then with perfect, devastating clarity. It wasn't that Marcus had fallen madly in love with Emily, though perhaps that had happened too. It was that Emily looked the part. Emily photographed well. Emily could stand next to Marcus at those charity galas and board dinners without his mother wincing or his father making pointed comments about maintaining standards. Savannah had walked out of that restaurant with her head high and her engagement ring left behind on the white tablecloth. She told herself she was strong. She told herself she deserved better. She told herself all the things her therapist and her best friend and her online support group had told her to say. And then, 6 months later, the wedding invitation had arrived. "There you are." Savannah's eyes snapped open. Her mother stood in the balcony doorway, resplendent in silver silk. Her expression caught somewhere between concern and exasperation. "People are asking where you went," Linda Hayes said. "It looks strange, you disappearing like this." "I needed air." "Well, you've had it. Now come back inside. Emily's about to cut the cake, and she wants you in the photos." Of course she did. Because Emily was gracious and magnanimous and wanted to show everyone that there were no hard feelings, that this was all very civilized and modern and mature. "I'll be there in a minute." "Savannah," her mother's voice sharpened, "I know this is difficult for you, but Emily is your sister. She didn't do this to hurt you." The laugh that escaped Savannah's throat was bitter and raw. "Didn't she? Marcus was never right for you anyway. You two wanted different things. Well, we wanted the same things until Emily showed up." Linda's mouth thinned into a disapproving line. "That's unfair. Emily can't help that she and Marcus connected. Love doesn't follow a schedule, sweetheart. Sometimes it just happens." Sometimes it just happens. As if Emily hadn't spent that entire semester abroad texting Marcus, hadn't engineered coincidental run-ins, hadn't shown up to every family dinner looking like something out of a fashion magazine while asking Marcus thoughtful questions about his work. "You need to let this go," her mother continued, softer now. "Holding on to resentment will only hurt you. Emily's happy. Marcus is happy. Don't you want them to be happy?" The terrible thing was that Savannah didn't know how to answer that question. She wasn't a vindictive person. She didn't want to be bitter. But standing here at her sister's wedding, watching Emily float through the reception in that perfect dress with that perfect smile, Savannah felt something dark and ugly coiling in her chest. "I want to be happy too," she whispered. "Then come inside and smile for the cameras. Show everyone that you've moved on." Linda reached out and smoothed a strand of hair behind Savannah's ear. "You're wearing that beautiful dress. You look lovely. Hold your head up." Lovely. Not beautiful. Not stunning. Lovely. The word people used when they were being polite. Savannah followed her mother back inside, where the reception was in full swing. The cake, 7 tiers of buttercream and gold leaf, stood in the center of the room like a monument to excess. Emily and Marcus stood beside it, his hand resting possessively on her waist, her head tilted against his shoulder in that effortlessly photogenic way she had. The photographer was already positioning family members for the formal shots. Savannah's father waved her over, his smile warm but tired. He'd tried to talk Emily out of this wedding, Savannah knew. Had actually sat Emily down and asked if she was sure, if she understood what this would do to Savannah. But Emily had cried and said she'd never meant to fall in love with Marcus. But she had, and didn't she deserve to be happy too? And their father, who had never been able to deny Emily anything, had ultimately paid for this palazzo and flown 200 guests to Rome because his youngest daughter asked him to. "Savannah, over here," the photographer called. "Stand next to your mother." She moved into position, muscle memory taking over. She knew how to do this. She'd spent 32 years standing in family photos, always positioned carefully so the camera would be kind, always wearing the right smile. Emily reached out and squeezed her hand. "I'm so glad you're here," she whispered, and Savannah could hear the genuine emotion in her voice. That was the worst part. Emily actually meant it. In her mind, she hadn't done anything wrong. She'd just fallen in love. The photographer counted down. 3, 2, 1. The flash went off, capturing them all. The perfect family at the perfect wedding. No one looking at that photo would know that Savannah's smile was held together with sheer willpower, or that her hand in Emily's felt like a betrayal of herself. After the photos, the dancing began. Marcus and Emily took the floor first, swaying to "At Last" by Etta James, which had been Savannah and Marcus's song, actually, but apparently that detail had been forgotten or ignored. Savannah stood at the edge of the crowd and watched, feeling like she was observing her own life from outside her body. "Savannah Hayes." The voice came from behind her, smooth and faintly amused. Savannah turned and found herself face to face with David Westbrook, a friend of Marcus's from Yale. She'd met him a dozen times at various events during her engagement, had always found him pleasant enough, if a bit too entitled. "David, hi." "Quite the party, isn't it?" He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of expensive scotch on his breath. Though, I have to say, you're handling this whole thing remarkably well. Most women would have skipped the wedding entirely. Most women probably weren't raised by Linda Hayes. He laughed. Fair point. Your mother does have a gift for social engineering. He tilted his head, studying her. You look beautiful tonight, by the way. That dress is stunning on you. There was something in his tone that made her skin prickle, an edge that hadn't been there during her engagement when she'd been Marcus's fiancée and therefore off limits. Thank you, she said carefully. I've always thought Marcus was an idiot for letting you go. David moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. If you'd been mine, I wouldn't have looked twice at anyone else, sister or not. Savannah took a step back. That's kind of you to say. I'm not being kind. I'm being honest. His hand landed on her arm, fingers curling around her wrist. You're in Rome for another 2 days, right? We should have dinner, just the two of us. I know a place near the Spanish Steps. Very private, very romantic. She pulled her arm free. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? You're single. I'm single. We're both stuck at this wedding watching your ex marry your sister. Seems like we could use some distraction. I appreciate the offer, but come on, Savannah. His voice dropped lower, more insistent. Don't be like that. I'm trying to show you a good time. You deserve it after everything you've been through. The words hit her like a slap. You deserve it. As if she was some charity case, some pitiful leftover woman who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention came her way. I said no, David. His expression hardened. You know, Marcus always said you could be difficult. I didn't believe him, but I guess... Is there a problem here? Savannah hadn't heard anyone approach, but suddenly there was a man standing beside her, tall and imposing in a dark suit. She didn't recognize him, but there was something about his presence, controlled, dangerous, absolutely certain, that made David take an immediate step back. No problem, David said quickly. Just catching up with an old friend. Didn't look like friendly catching up. The stranger's voice was quiet, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath. Looked like you were bothering her. I wasn't. We were just... David glanced at Savannah, then back at the stranger. Who the hell are you? Someone who thinks you should walk away now. For a moment, David looked like he might argue. Then something in the stranger's eyes must have convinced him otherwise, because he muttered something under his breath and disappeared into the crowd. Savannah exhaled slowly, her heart hammering. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. The stranger turned to face her fully, and Savannah felt her breath catch. He was striking, not handsome in the conventional sense, but compelling in a way that made it impossible to look away. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that seemed to see straight through her. Are you all right? He asked. I'm fine. Just another hazard of being the abandoned fiancé at the wedding. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Sorry, that was... honest, he finished. He studied her for a moment. You're Savannah, the bride's sister. And you are? Adrian Cross. I'm here with the Callaways, business associate of Marcus's father. Of course. Another one of the investment banking crowd. Savannah should have guessed from the watch, understated but probably worth more than her car, and the way he carried himself, like someone accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. Well, thank you for the rescue, Adrian Cross. I should probably... Dance with me. She blinked. What? You've been standing at the edge of this party for the last 20 minutes looking like you'd rather be anywhere else. Dance with me. Give them something else to look at. I don't think that's... One dance, he said. Then you can go back to whatever quiet corner you've been hiding in. There was a challenge in his voice, but also something else. Something that sounded almost like understanding. Savannah found herself nodding before she'd fully thought it through. Adrian led her onto the dance floor just as the band shifted into something slower, jazzier. His hand settled at her waist, and Savannah was suddenly acutely aware of how solid he felt, how completely present. Most men she'd danced with at events like this had been distracted, their attention divided between conversation and social calculation. Adrian's attention was entirely on her. You're wondering why I asked you to dance, he said. The thought crossed my mind. I don't like bullies, And I don't like watching someone be cornered at a party. Very chivalrous of you. A slight smile touched his mouth. I'm not chivalrous, but I do believe in fair fights. They moved together in silence for a moment, and Savannah became aware of eyes on them. She could see her mother watching from across the room, eyebrows raised in question. Emily had noticed too, her gaze curious as she danced with Marcus. Everyone's staring, Savannah murmured. Let them stare. You're not doing anything wrong. I'm dancing with a stranger at my sister's wedding to my ex-fiancé. In some circles, that might be considered tacky. In some circles, your sister marrying your ex-fiancé might be considered tacky, Adrian replied evenly. But here we are. Savannah felt a surprised laugh bubble up. You don't pull your punches, do you? Life's too short for polite lies. Most people don't see it that way. Most people are exhausting. He spun her smoothly, and for a moment Savannah forgot where she was. Forgot the eyes watching. Forgot everything except the music and the man holding her. Tell me something, Savannah. Why did you come to this wedding? Because my family expected me to. That's not a reason. That's an excuse. She bristled. You don't know me well enough to make that judgment. You're right. I don't. But I've seen that look before, the one you had when you were standing on that balcony earlier. Like you're drowning and everyone around you is telling you to smile while you go under. The observation was so accurate it stole her breath. You're very presumptuous for someone I met 5 minutes ago. 6 minutes. And I'm also right. The song ended, but Adrian didn't immediately release her. For a heartbeat, they stood there in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by swirling couples, but somehow separate from all of it. Thank you for the dance, Savannah said finally, stepping back. The pleasure was mine. Adrian reached into his jacket and produced a business card, pressing it into her palm. If you ever need a fair fight, call me. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as smoothly as he'd appeared. Savannah looked down at the card. Expensive cardstock, minimal design, Adrian Cross and a phone number. No company name, no title, no email address. She slipped it into her clutch and tried not to think about how her hand was still warm from where he'd held it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. More champagne, more forced smiles, more well-meaning guests telling her how brave she was, how gracious, how mature. By the time the reception wound down, Savannah's face hurt from holding her smile and her feet ached from her heels. She was standing near the palazzo entrance waiting for her car when Emily found her. Savannah, wait. Savannah turned. Emily had changed out of her wedding dress into a silk going-away outfit, her hair still perfect despite hours of dancing. She looked radiant, happy, everything a bride should be. I just wanted to say thank you, Emily said, reaching for Savannah's hands. It meant the world to me that you were here. I know it couldn't have been easy. No, Savannah wanted to say. It wasn't easy. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But you don't get to thank me for it, because you're the reason it was hard in the first place. I'm glad you're happy, Savannah said instead, because it was easier than the truth. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I never meant to hurt you. You believe that, don't you? I tried so hard not to fall in love with him, but... Emily, Savannah gently extracted her hands. It's late. You should get back to your husband. The word hung between them. Husband. The man who was supposed to have been Savannah's. Emily wiped her eyes, nodding. Will you come visit us? Once we're settled in the new house? I don't want this to break us. You're my sister. You're my... Have a wonderful honeymoon, Savannah interrupted, unable to bear another second of Emily's tearful gratitude. I'll see you when you get back. She escaped before Emily could say anything else, practically running to the waiting car. The driver took one look at her face and wisely said nothing, just pulled away from the palazzo and headed toward her hotel. Back in her room, Savannah kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the bed. She should feel relieved that the weekend was over, that she'd survived, that she could go home tomorrow and put this entire nightmare behind her. Instead, she felt hollow. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. You handled yourself beautifully tonight. I'm proud of you. Savannah stared at the message. Handled herself. Like she was a poorly trained dog who'd managed not to bite anyone. Another text, this time from her best friend Zoe. You're a goddamn saint for getting through that. Call me when you're home. wine and Thai food, and we'll trash talk everyone. At least Zoe understood. At least someone in her life was willing to acknowledge that this entire situation was insane. Savannah changed out of her dress and into pajamas, then stood at the window looking out over Rome. The city glittered in the darkness, beautiful and ancient and utterly indifferent to her pain. She pulled Adrian's business card from her clutch and turned it over in her fingers. "If you ever need a fair fight, call me." What did that even mean? And why had he given it to her? They were strangers. They'd shared one dance and a brief conversation about bullies and drowning. Savannah set the card on the nightstand and climbed into bed. She wouldn't call him. Tomorrow she'd fly home, and in a few weeks this would all be a bad memory. She'd move on. She'd rebuild her life. She'd prove to everyone, to her family, to Marcus, to Emily, to herself, that she was fine. But as she lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, Savannah couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted tonight. That the woman who walked out of that palazzo wasn't quite the same woman who'd walked in. And she couldn't stop thinking about Adrian Cross's eyes, and the way he'd looked at her like she was someone worth fighting for. The next day unfolded in a haze of exhaustion and forced normalcy. Savannah packed her bags, had breakfast with her parents, who spent the entire meal praising Emily's wedding and carefully not mentioning Marcus, and made it to the airport with 2 hours to spare. She was sitting at her gate, scrolling mindlessly through her phone, when she saw the first photo. Emily had posted to Instagram, a shot of her and Marcus on the Palazzo Terrace, the Roman skyline glowing behind them. "Forever starts now," the caption read, followed by a string of heart emojis. Savannah's thumb hovered over the screen. She should unfollow Emily. She should mute her at least. There was no reason to torture herself with wedding photos and honeymoon updates. But before she could decide, another notification popped up. Someone had tagged her in a comment on Emily's post. "At Savannah Hayes handled this like a queen. If my sister stole my man, I would have burned the whole wedding down." Savannah's stomach dropped. She clicked through and found dozens of comments, most of them from people she didn't know. Apparently, the wedding had been well documented on social media, and the story of the bride marrying her sister's ex-fiancé had caught fire. The older sister was there and everything. That's wild. Imagine having to smile through your sister's wedding to your man. Emily's beautiful, but that's some cold-blooded shit. Team Savannah, all the way. There were photos, too. Someone had captured Savannah standing alone on the balcony, her expression unguarded. Another showed her dancing with Adrian, and the comments on that one were particularly brutal. At least she found someone hot at the wedding. "Mystery man to the rescue. Who is he? I need to know." Savannah closed the app and shoved her phone into her bag. This was a nightmare. By the time she got home, the entire internet would be dissecting her life, her relationship with Emily, her weight, her fashion choices, her... "Savannah Hayes?" She looked up. A woman in her 50s, elegant in a linen suit, stood nearby. "I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to say that I think you're incredibly strong. What you did this weekend, being there for your sister despite everything, that took real grace." "Thank you," Savannah managed, though the compliment felt like nails on a chalkboard. "I have 2 daughters myself, and I can't imagine..." The woman shook her head. "Anyway, I just wanted you to know that not everyone thinks you're the villain in this story." She walked away before Savannah could respond, leaving her sitting there with the terrible realization that people actually were picking sides, that her private pain had become public entertainment. The flight home was mercifully uneventful. Savannah slept through most of it, exhausted in a way that went bone deep. When she finally walked into her apartment in Manhattan, she felt like she'd been gone for a month instead of a long weekend. Zoe was waiting for her as promised, with wine and Thai food and a fury that made Savannah want to cry with gratitude. "I can't believe they actually did it," Zoe said, pouring them each a generous glass of wine. "I mean, I knew they were engaged, but I kept thinking someone would come to their senses. Your parents, at least. But no, they just threw them a fairy tale wedding like this is totally normal. My mother thinks I'm being dramatic. Your mother thinks image is more important than basic human decency." Zoe handed her the wine. "Drink. You've earned it." They settled on the couch, and Savannah recounted the weekend in brutal detail. The comments from relatives, David's proposition, the endless photos, Emily's tearful gratitude. "She actually thanked you?" Zoe looked incredulous. "For what? For not setting the cake on fire?" "For being there. For being gracious." Jesus Christ. Zoe drained half her wine in one swallow. I know she's your sister, but I really want to hate her right now. She doesn't think she did anything wrong. That's the part I can't get past. In her mind, she just fell in love. It was nobody's fault. It was absolutely her fault, and Marcus's. And your parents for enabling this whole thing. Zoe reached over and squeezed Savannah's hand. You know that, right? This isn't on you. Savannah nodded, but the words felt hollow. Because part of her, a small, toxic part she hated, whispered that maybe it was on her. Maybe if she'd been different, been better, been more like Emily, Marcus would have stayed. Maybe she'd failed some fundamental test without even knowing it. Oh, before I forget, Zoe said, reaching for her phone, you need to see this. Some gossip site picked up the wedding story. No, absolutely not. You need to know what they're saying. I really don't. But Zoe was already pulling up the article. Wedding Wars, Bride Marries Sister's Ex-Fiancé in Lavish Rome Ceremony. The piece was exactly as awful as Savannah had feared. They dug up old photos of her and Marcus together, contrasted them with wedding shots of Emily and Marcus. The comments section was a war zone of people either defending Emily's right to love who she loved or calling her a heartless snake. And there, in the middle of it all, was a photo of Savannah dancing with Adrian. The caption read, Mystery Man comforts jilted sister at wedding reception. At least you look hot, Zoe offered. Savannah dropped her head into her hands. This is a disaster. It'll blow over. Next week, someone else will do something scandalous and everyone will forget about you. But Savannah wasn't sure she believed that. The internet had a long memory, and she'd just become a cautionary tale, or worse, a victim people could pity from the comfort of their keyboards. She spent the next week trying to rebuild some semblance of normal life. She went to work at the nonprofit where she managed fundraising campaigns. She hit the gym. She met friends for dinner. She did all the things a well-adjusted woman recovering from public humiliation was supposed to do. But at night, alone in her apartment, the darkness crept back in. The photos from Rome haunted her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Emily in that perfect dress, Marcus looking at her with the kind of adoration he'd once aimed at Savannah. And she heard her mother's voice. Don't you want them to be happy? 10 days after the wedding, Savannah was having coffee with Zoe when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Is this Savannah Hayes? The voice was unfamiliar, professionally polite. Yes, who's calling? My name is Richard Patterson. I'm a freelance journalist working on a feature about modern family dynamics and wedding etiquette. I was hoping you'd be willing to speak with me about your sister's recent wedding. Savannah's blood went cold. How did you get this number? I'm reaching out to several wedding guests for their perspectives. This isn't an expose, Ms. Hayes. I'm interested in the nuanced conversation about I'm not interested. Savannah hung up, her hands shaking. What was that? Zoe asked. A reporter asking about the wedding. Oh, hell no. Zoe's expression darkened. They can't seriously be... Savannah's phone rang again. Different number. This time she didn't pick up, but the voicemail that followed made her stomach turn. Hi, Savannah. This is Jennifer Chen from Modern Love magazine. I'm working on a piece about non-traditional weddings and the complexities of family relationships. I'd love to get your perspective on delete. Over the next 3 days, Savannah received 17 more calls from various media outlets, 3 direct messages on Instagram from bloggers, and 2 emails from podcasters who wanted to explore her story. Her story. Like her pain was content to be consumed. She stopped answering her phone. She locked down her social media. She asked her boss if she could work from home for a while, citing family issues, which was technically true, even if it was also a lie. But the worst call came on a Thursday night, 2 weeks after the wedding. Savannah was in bed, trying to lose herself in a novel, when her phone rang. She almost ignored it, but the caller ID showed her father's name. Dad? Savannah, sweetheart. His voice was strained. Have you been online today? Her heart sank. No. Why? Someone wrote a blog post. It's getting a lot of attention. Your mother thinks we should have the family lawyer look into whether it's defamatory. What kind of blog post? It's about the wedding. About you and Emily and Marcus. He paused. Some of it is very unkind. Savannah pulled up her laptop with shaking hands. It took less than 30 seconds to find the post. It had been shared thousands of times, the headline screaming, "The Invisible Sister, How Society's Beauty Standards Enable Cruelty." The post was written by someone claiming to be a former classmate of Savannah's and Emily's, though the byline was anonymous. It detailed years of perceived favoritism toward Emily, casual cruelties from family and friends, and culminated in the wedding as proof that beautiful people could get away with anything. Parts of it were accurate enough to make Savannah's skin crawl. The writer described specific incidents: Emily getting cast in the school play while Savannah ran tech, Emily being crowned homecoming queen while Savannah wasn't even nominated, boys who'd asked Savannah to study groups but asked Emily to dances. But other parts were exaggerated or outright false, painting their parents as monsters and Emily as a calculating villain. It made their entire family look toxic and dysfunctional. The comments section was a feeding frenzy. "Savannah?" Her father's voice pulled her back. "Are you still there?" "I'm here. We're going to fix this. Your mother is already drafting a response, and please don't." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "Please, just leave it alone." "But sweetheart, people are saying terrible things about you, about all of us. We can't just..." "Responding will only make it worse. This is what they want: engagement, drama. If we ignore it, it'll die down." Your mother doesn't think..." "I don't care what mother thinks." Savannah's voice cracked. "For once, just once, can you please do what I'm asking instead of what she wants?" Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "All right, if that's what you want." "It is." After they hung up, Savannah sat in the darkness, laptop screen glowing, and read every single comment on that blog post. She read strangers dissecting her life, her choices, her body, her worth. She read people defending Emily, attacking Emily, debating whether Savannah was a victim or a doormat or both. And somewhere around 2 in the morning, something inside her broke. Not the clean break of a bone that could be set and healed. The messy, complicated fracturing of a person who'd been holding herself together with sheer will and finally ran out of strength. Savannah closed her laptop and went to the bathroom. She looked at herself in the mirror. Really looked. Maybe for the first time in months. She saw dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep could touch. She saw a woman who'd spent her entire life trying to be enough and failing. The business card was still in her wallet. She'd transferred it from her clutch the day she got home, though she'd told herself she'd throw it away. Adrian Cross's number. "If you ever need a fair fight, call me." Savannah pulled out her phone. It was past 2 in the morning. He probably wouldn't answer, and if he did, what was she even going to say? That she was drowning, that she needed someone to see her, really see her, the way he had for those 6 minutes on a dance floor in Rome? Her finger hovered over the call button. This was insane. She didn't know this man. He was probably asleep, or in bed with someone, or had given her that card as a polite gesture he'd already forgotten. But the alternative was another night alone in her apartment, another morning waking up to strangers picking apart her life, another day pretending she was fine when everything inside her was screaming. Savannah pressed call before she could change her mind. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Savannah?" His voice was clear, alert, like he'd been expecting her. "What's wrong?" Not hello. Not do you know what time it is. Just immediate certainty that something was wrong and that she needed him. Her voice broke. She'd meant to be composed, to explain calmly, but the moment she heard his voice, everything she'd been holding back came flooding out. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be here, in this city, with people picking apart my life like I'm some kind of tragic character in a story they're all watching for entertainment. I can't go to another family dinner and pretend I'm fine. I can't..." "Where are you?" "Home. My apartment." "Are you safe?" The question caught her off guard. "Yes, I'm not going to hurt myself. I just..." "Savannah," his voice cut through her spiral, calm and certain. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Can you do that?" "Yes. I'm in Seoul right now. That puts me 14 hours ahead of you, but I can be in New York in less than a day. Do you want me to come?" The question was so simple, so direct, that it took her breath away. "You don't even know me." I know enough. Do you want me to come? Did she? This was crazy. He was offering to fly halfway around the world because she'd called him in the middle of a breakdown. That wasn't normal. That wasn't how people behaved. But then again, nothing about her life was normal right now. Yes, she whispered. Please. Then I'll be there. She could hear movement on his end, the sound of him already making arrangements. I'm going to give you a number. It's for a car service. They'll take you anywhere you need to go, anytime, no questions asked. Use them if you need to get out of your apartment. Adrian, you don't have to. Text me if anything changes. If you feel unsafe, if someone bothers you, if you need anything at all. I'll have my phone on me the entire flight. Understood? Understood. Good. I'll see you soon, Savannah. He hung up, and Savannah stood there in her bathroom, phone still pressed to her ear, feeling like she'd just stepped off the edge of a cliff. What had she done? But underneath the shock and the fear was something else, something that felt almost like hope. Because for the first time in weeks, maybe years, someone had heard her say she was drowning and actually thrown her a rope. 23 hours later, Savannah stood in her apartment staring at her phone like it might explode. Adrian had texted her an hour ago with a simple message. Landed. I'll be at your building in 30 minutes. She'd spent the time since his call in a strange state of suspended reality. She'd showered, changed clothes 3 times, cleaned her apartment even though it was already clean, and tried not to think too hard about what she'd actually done. She'd called a man she barely knew and asked him to fly across the world to rescue her from her own life. When she put it that way, it sounded completely insane. The buzzer rang, sharp and sudden, making her jump. Savannah pressed the intercom button with a shaking hand. Ms. Hayes? The voice was unfamiliar, professional. Mr. Cross is here. Send him up. She opened her apartment door and waited, heart hammering against her ribs. The elevator chimed, and then Adrian stepped into her hallway, and Savannah was struck all over again by the sheer presence of him. He looked exactly as she remembered, dark suit, sharp features, eyes that seemed to catalog everything in a single glance. But there was something different about seeing him here, in her space, rather than at that Roman palazzo. He stopped a few feet from her door. May I come in? Yes, of course. She stepped aside, suddenly hyper-aware of her small apartment, her second-hand furniture, the stack of magazines on her coffee table. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? You must be exhausted from the flight. I'm fine. He moved into her living room with the easy confidence of someone who is comfortable anywhere. How are you holding up? The question, delivered so directly, nearly undid her. I've had better weeks. I imagine so. He turned to face her fully. I read the blog post, and the articles, and about 500 of the most vicious comments the internet had to offer. Savannah felt heat rise in her cheeks. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. If I'm going to help you, I need to understand what we're dealing with. He paused. They're brutal, and most of them don't even know you. That's the internet for you. Everyone's a critic when they're anonymous. It's not just criticism, Savannah. Some of those comments cross the line into harassment. Have any of them tried to contact you directly? She thought about the reporters, the DMs, the emails from strangers offering unsolicited advice or cruel observations about her weight, her fashion choices, her life. A few. Show me. Adrian, I didn't ask you to come here so you could show me. There was no room for argument in his voice. Savannah pulled up her phone and handed it to him, watching as he scrolled through the messages with an expression that grew progressively darker. When he reached the DM from someone who'd sent her a detailed message about how she deserved what she got for letting herself go, his jaw tightened visibly. This is unacceptable, he said quietly. It's just people being cruel online. It happens. Not to you. Not anymore. He handed back her phone. I'm going to make some calls. By tomorrow, most of these accounts will be suspended or deleted. Savannah stared at him. You can't just... How would you even... I have resources. Let me use them. Adrian. She set her phone down carefully. I appreciate that you came all this way. I really do. But I didn't call you so you could fight the entire internet on my behalf. I called because I was having a breakdown, and you were the only person I could think of who might actually understand what I was feeling. Something shifted in his expression. And what were you feeling? Like I was invisible. Like I've spent my whole life being told I'm not quite enough, and watching people I love choose everyone else first. Her voice cracked. Like maybe everyone else is right, and there's something fundamentally wrong with me that makes me easy to leave. Adrian closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't reach for her, didn't try to comfort her with empty platitudes, just stood close enough that she could feel the solid certainty of his presence. "There is nothing wrong with you," he said, and the conviction in his voice made her throat tight. "Your sister made a choice. Your ex-fiancé made a choice. Those choices say everything about who they are and nothing about who you are." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. I've watched you, Savannah. The way you move through the world, the way you try to make yourself smaller so other people can feel bigger. You think it makes you kind, but it just makes you easy to overlook. And the people in your life have been overlooking you for so long they don't even realize they're doing it anymore." The accuracy of his observation hit her like a physical blow. "How do you see that? We've met twice. I make my living reading people, understanding what motivates them, what scares them, what they want most in the world." He tilted his head slightly. "You want to be seen, really seen, not as someone's sister or someone's ex-fiancé or the woman who handled a bad situation with grace, just as yourself." Savannah felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You make it sound simple. It is simple. It's just not easy." He stepped back, giving her space. "I meant what I said on the phone. I can take you away from this. Not forever, but long enough for the noise to die down. Long enough for you to figure out who you are when you're not performing for an audience." "Take me where?" "Seoul. I have business there that will keep me occupied for the next several months. You could come with me, see a different part of the world, decide what you actually want your life to look like." The offer was so absurd, so completely outside the realm of reasonable decisions, that Savannah almost laughed. "I can't just run away to South Korea with someone I barely know." "Why not?" Because that's not how real life works. I have a job, an apartment, responsibilities. Your job will give you a leave of absence if you ask. Your apartment will still be here when you get back. And your responsibilities are to yourself, not to the people who've been using your compliance as permission to treat you badly. "I don't even know you," she said, but the protest felt weak even to her own ears. "Then get to know me. You have 24 hours to decide. If you want to stay in New York and ride this out, I'll respect that choice. But if you want out, I'm offering you an exit." Savannah sank onto her couch, overwhelmed. "Why are you doing this? What do you get out of it?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "I don't have many weaknesses, Savannah, but I can't stand watching people be diminished by those who should protect them. You called me because you were drowning. I'm throwing you a rope. Whether you grab it is entirely up to you." He left shortly after, checking into a hotel nearby and giving her space to think. Savannah spent the rest of the day in a fog, Adrian's offer circling her mind like a shark in dark water. It was reckless, irresponsible, the kind of impulsive decision her mother would have a stroke over, which was, perversely, part of its appeal. Zoe came over that evening with Chinese food and found Savannah sitting cross-legged on her couch, surrounded by notepads covered in frantic pro-con lists. "Okay," Zoe said, setting down the takeout bags. "What's happening?" "You sent me a text that just said emergency with 7 exclamation points. Adrian Cross flew in from Seoul." Zoe blinked. "I'm sorry, what? Mystery wedding guy? He's here? In New York?" "In New York. He showed up at my apartment this morning." "Okay, backing up. Why is he here? Did you invite him? Are you in danger? Should I be calling someone?" "I called him 2 nights ago, during a breakdown." Savannah explained the phone call, Adrian's arrival, his offer to take her to Seoul. By the time she finished, Zoe was staring at her with an expression somewhere between concern and fascination. "Let me get this straight. A man you danced with once at your sister's wedding flew across the world because you called him crying, and now he wants to take you to South Korea." "That's the situation, yes. And you're considering it." "I don't know what I'm considering. That's why you're here. Tell me I'm insane." Zoe opened a container of lo mein, considering, "Are you attracted to him?" That's not the point." It's absolutely the point. If this was some random guy offering you a free trip to Asia, I'd tell you to run. But this is a guy who made your knees weak on a dance floor, flew halfway around the world when you needed help, and is offering you a chance to escape the nightmare your life has become. So I'm asking again, are you attracted to him? Savannah thought about Adrian's hands on her waist as they danced, the way his attention had felt like a physical touch, the absolute certainty in his voice when he told her there was nothing wrong with her. Yes, she admitted quietly. And do you trust him? I don't know him well enough to trust him. But your gut. What does your gut say? Savannah closed her eyes, searching for the answer. Her gut said Adrian Cross was dangerous in ways she didn't fully understand yet. It also said he was honest in ways most people weren't, that he saw her clearly and wasn't asking her to be anything other than exactly who she was. My gut says he's not lying to me, she said finally. Then maybe you should go. Zoe reached over and took her hand. Look, I love you, and I want you safe. But I also want you happy. And you have not been happy, really, genuinely happy, in a very long time. Maybe not since before Marcus. This is crazy, Zoe. People don't just run off to Asia with mysterious strangers. People absolutely do. They just don't usually admit it. Zoe squeezed her hand. What's the worst that could happen? He could be a serial killer. He flew commercial and checked into the Four Seasons. Serial killers don't have expense accounts. He could be using me for something. I don't even know what he does for a living. So ask him. You've got 24 hours. Use them to actually get to know him instead of spiraling in your apartment. Savannah pulled out her phone and stared at Adrian's number. If I do this, if I actually go to Seoul, you have to promise me something. Anything. If I disappear or turn up dead or join a cult, you have my permission to say you told me so at my funeral. Zoe laughed. Deal. Now text him and set up dinner. You can't make a decision about running away with someone based on one conversation in your living room. Adrian responded to her text within seconds, suggesting a restaurant in the West Village that Savannah had always wanted to try but never had an excuse to visit. She met him there 2 hours later, wearing a simple black dress and enough concealer to hide the evidence of too many sleepless nights. He was already seated when she arrived, and he stood as she approached the table. The gesture was old-fashioned, almost courtly, and it made something flutter in Savannah's chest. You look beautiful, he said as she sat down. You look like you didn't sleep on the plane. A slight smile. Guilty. I worked most of the flight. Doing what exactly? You never told me what kind of business you're in. Import-export, international trade, acquisitions. He said it smoothly, but Savannah caught something in his tone, a careful neutrality that suggested there was more to the story. That's vague? It's also accurate. I broker deals between companies in different countries. It requires a lot of travel, a lot of negotiation, and a fair amount of risk. Legal risk or the other kind? His eyes sharpened with what might have been approval. You're more direct than you were in Rome. I've had a terrible week. It's made me less patient with bullshit. Savannah leaned forward. If I'm going to consider your offer, and I'm not saying I am, I need to know who you actually are, not the business card version, the real version. Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her. Then he sat back in his chair and seemed to come to some internal decision. All right, the real version. I grew up in Chicago, South Side, not the nice part. My father ran an auto shop that was barely profitable. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I got out through a combination of intelligence, ruthlessness, and a willingness to do things other people wouldn't. What kind of things? The kind that pay well and don't appear on tax returns. He held her gaze steadily. I won't lie to you, Savannah. My business operates in gray areas. I follow the law when it's convenient and work around it when it's not. I've made enemies. I've made decisions that would horrify most people. And I sleep fine at night because everyone I deal with knows exactly what game we're playing. Savannah should have been shocked. Horrified, even. Instead, she felt a strange sense of relief at his honesty. Are you telling me this so I'll run away? I'm telling you this so you can make an informed choice. If you come to Seoul with me, you'll be entering my world. It's not always pretty, and it's definitely not safe. But it is honest. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. Unlike my family who pretends everything is fine while they tear each other apart with a smile. Exactly. He leaned forward, I can protect you from the noise, Savannah. I can give you space to figure out what you want, but I can't protect you from who I am. If that's a deal breaker, tell me now and we'll have a pleasant dinner and part as friends. The waiter arrived to take their order, giving Savannah a moment to process. When they were alone again, she asked the question that had been burning in her mind since he'd appeared at her apartment. Why me? You could have any woman you want. Why fly across the world for someone you danced with once? Because when I look at you, I don't see someone who needs to be fixed or managed or improved. I see someone who's been systematically convinced she's not enough, and it makes me furious. His voice was low, intense. You stood on that balcony in Rome looking like you wanted to disappear, and I thought, there's a woman who's forgotten she has the right to take up space in the world. I can't fix your family. I can't undo what they did to you, but I can give you room to remember who you are when no one's telling you who to be. Savannah felt something crack open in her chest. That's the most romantic and terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me. Romance and terror aren't mutually exclusive. They talked through dinner, and Savannah found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in weeks. Adrian was easy to talk to once you got past the intimidating exterior. He asked questions that actually required thought, listened like her answers mattered, and made her laugh with dry observations about the absurdity of high society. So your business keeps you in Seoul? She asked over dessert. Primarily. I have operations in 6 countries, but Seoul is my base. It's cosmopolitan enough to be interesting, but different enough from the States that you can disappear if you want to. And you think I want to disappear? I think you want to stop being the story everyone else is telling about you and start being the person you actually are. He paused. I have an apartment there. 3 bedrooms, so you'd have your own space. There's a driver who can take you anywhere you want to go. And if you decide after a week that you've made a terrible mistake, I'll put you on the first flight home, no questions asked. Just like that? Just like that. This only works if it's your choice, Savannah. Completely and freely yours. After dinner, they walked through the West Village, past brownstones and late-night cafes and couples strolling hand in hand. It was a beautiful New York evening, the kind that usually made Savannah feel alive and connected to the city's energy. Tonight, it just felt like a reminder of everything she was trying to escape. I need to know something, she said as they paused at a corner. What do you want from this arrangement? From me? Adrian turned to face her, the streetlight casting his features in sharp relief. Honestly, I don't know yet. Maybe I want the satisfaction of watching you remember your own strength. Maybe I'm just tired of watching powerful people crush everyone around them without consequences. Or maybe... He stopped himself. Maybe what? Maybe I saw something in you that reminded me of myself before I learned how to fight back. And I thought, I can help her skip some of the painful lessons. That's assuming I want to fight back. Don't you? The question hung between them. Did she want to fight back? Did she want to stop being the gracious sister, the understanding daughter, the woman who made everyone else comfortable at the expense of her own happiness? Yes, Savannah said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. I want to stop being invisible. I want to matter. Then come to Seoul. Not because I'm asking, but because you're choosing yourself for once. He walked her back to her apartment building, and Savannah found herself reluctant to say goodnight. Standing in the glow of her building's entrance, she made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. I'll come, she said, but I have conditions. Name them. I want my own space, like you promised. I want to be able to leave whenever I want, and I want honesty between us. No games, no manipulation, no using me for whatever plan you might have. Agreed. Anything else? If this goes wrong, if you turn out to be someone I can't trust, I need to know you'll let me go without a fight. Something flickered in his eyes. I'll let you go, but I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you want to stay. The intensity in his voice sent heat racing through her. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him. I don't deal in half measures, Savannah. If you come with me, I'm going to show you exactly how extraordinary you are. I'm going to put the whole world at your feet, and when you finally see yourself the way I see you, you won't want to go back to being invisible. Savannah's breath caught. You're very sure of yourself? I'm sure of you. He lifted his hand and brushed a strand of hair from her face, the touch feather-light but electric. The question is, are you ready to be sure of yourself? She should step back, should put distance between them before this intensity became something she couldn't control. Instead, she found herself swaying closer. I don't know what I'm ready for, she admitted. Then come to Seoul and find out. His thumb traced her jawline, a whisper of contact that made her shiver. I leave tomorrow at 6 p.m. Meet me at the airport if you want this. Don't if you don't. No pressure, no judgment, just choice. He stepped back, breaking the spell, and Savannah felt the loss of his proximity like a physical ache. Good night, Savannah. Good night, Adrian. She watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the New York night, and wondered if she'd just agreed to the best or worst decision of her life. The next morning, Savannah woke up with her decision made. She called her boss and requested a 3-month leave of absence, citing family stress and mental health. To her surprise, he approved it immediately. Apparently, the viral wedding story had reached even the nonprofit world, and her boss had been expecting her to ask for time off. Then came the harder conversation. She called her mother. Savannah, sweetheart, I was just about to call you. Emily's back from her honeymoon, and she wants to have lunch this weekend. Just the 4 of us. Mom, I'm leaving New York. Silence. Then, what do you mean, leaving? I need some time away, some distance from everything that's happened. Where are you going? For how long? Savannah took a breath. I'm going to Seoul, and I don't know how long I'll be gone. Seoul? In Korea? Savannah, that's halfway around the world. You can't just... Who do you even know in Seoul? A friend. Someone who can help me get some perspective. This is about the wedding, isn't it? Her mother's voice took on that particular tone of controlled frustration Savannah knew so well. Sweetheart, I know the media attention has been difficult, but running away isn't the answer. What you need is to face this head-on, show everyone that you're fine. I'm not fine, Mom. The words came out sharper than intended. I'm not fine, and I'm tired of pretending I'm just so everyone else can feel comfortable. That's not fair. We've all been doing our best to support you through this. You threw Emily a wedding to my ex-fiancé and expected me to smile through it. That's not support, that's performance. Another silence, longer this time. When Linda spoke again, her voice was brittle. I don't know what you want me to say. Emily is my daughter too. Was I supposed to tell her she couldn't marry the man she loves because it might hurt your feelings? You were supposed to acknowledge that it was cruel. You were supposed to be on my side for once, instead of asking me to be gracious about being humiliated. Savannah, I'm going to Seoul, Mom. I'm not asking for permission. I'm letting you know as a courtesy. What about Christmas? What about... I'll call you when I'm settled. Savannah's hand was shaking as she held the phone. I love you, but I need to do this for myself. She hung up before her mother could mount another argument, then immediately turned off her phone. She couldn't handle the barrage of calls and texts that would inevitably follow. Zoe came over to help her pack, practical as ever. Okay, Seoul in April, you'll need layers, and comfortable shoes you're going to want to explore. She pulled clothes from Savannah's closet with ruthless efficiency. Are you scared? Terrified. Good. That means it matters. Zoe paused, holding up a dress. You know you don't have to do this, right? You can still change your mind. I know, but you're going anyway. I'm going anyway. Savannah folded a sweater carefully. Does that make me crazy? Maybe, but it also makes you brave, and I haven't seen you be brave in a long time. Zoe sat down on the bed beside her. I'm proud of you. Even if this turns out to be a spectacular disaster, at least you're choosing something for yourself. What if I'm wrong about him? What if he's dangerous? Then you call me, and I'll fly to Seoul with a baseball bat. Zoe squeezed her hand. But I don't think you're wrong. I think you're finally listening to yourself instead of everyone else. By the time Savannah arrived at JFK, her heart was racing so hard she could barely breathe. She'd packed 2 suitcases, arranged for her apartment to be looked after, and left a note for her father explaining her decision. She'd done everything right. She still felt like she was jumping off a cliff. Adrian was waiting in the first-class lounge, looking crisp and unruffled in dark jeans and a white shirt. When he saw her, something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. You came, he said. I came. Savannah set down her bags. I'm still not sure this isn't completely insane. It probably is. He stood and picked up her luggage like it weighed nothing. But the best decisions usually are. The flight to Seoul was 14 hours of surreal luxury. Adrian had booked them seats in first class that converted into fully flat beds, with privacy screens and more amenities than Savannah had ever experienced. She tried to sleep but found herself too wired, too aware of Adrian reading on his tablet beside her. Can I ask you something? She said after several hours. Always. Why aren't you married? Someone like you, successful, attractive, clearly not lacking in confidence. Why are you single? Adrian set down his tablet, considering the question. I was engaged once, 7 years ago. What happened? She wanted me to be someone else, someone softer, more conventional, less willing to make hard choices. I loved her, but I loved my freedom more. He paused. I also learned something important from that relationship. What? That I'm not built for partnerships where one person has to shrink to make room for the other. If I'm going to share my life with someone, it has to be an equal, someone who doesn't need me to be anything other than exactly who I am. That's a high bar. It's the only bar that matters. He turned to look at her directly. What about you? Was Marcus the only serious relationship you've had? No, there was someone in college, Daniel. We dated for 2 years. Savannah pulled the airplane blanket tighter around herself. He broke up with me right before graduation, said he loved me but wasn't in love with me, whatever that means. It means he was a coward who didn't want to admit he was leaving you for someone else. The bluntness startled a laugh out of her. How did you? Because men who actually lose feelings just drift away. They don't make dramatic pronouncements about love versus being in love. They justify. Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact. Did you ever find out if there was someone else? He married his study partner 6 months later, so yes. Then I rest my case. He reached over and took her hand, the gesture casual but grounding. You have terrible taste in men, Savannah. Present company excluded? Present company is an entirely different category. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I'm not going to waste your time pretending to be someone I'm not, and I'm not going to leave you for someone who fits better into my life plan. If this doesn't work, it'll be because we're genuinely incompatible, not because I was looking for an excuse to trade you in for a newer model. The raw honesty of it made Savannah's throat tight. You say things like that so easily. Because they're true, and because you deserve to hear them. They landed in Seoul as dawn was breaking over the city, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. Savannah pressed her face to the window, watching the unfamiliar landscape spread out below. High-rises and mountains, tradition and modernity existing side by side. Welcome to your new beginning, Adrian said softly beside her. A driver was waiting for them at the airport, a quiet man in his 50s who greeted Adrian in Korean and took their luggage without comment. The drive into the city was a blur of new sights and sounds. Neon signs in Hangul, streets already bustling despite the early hour, the smell of food cooking from street vendors. Adrian's apartment was in Gangnam, on the 35th floor of a sleek glass tower. When he opened the door and ushered her inside, Savannah felt her breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and the space itself was minimalist but warm. Clean lines, comfortable furniture, art on the walls that looked original and expensive. Your room is this way, Adrian said, leading her down a hallway. He opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with its own bathroom, a view that rivaled the living room, and a closet that was already stocked with hangers and organizational systems. This is beautiful, Savannah breathed. Make it yours. There's a phone on the nightstand with my number programmed in. Call if you need anything. The driver's number is there too. Jinho speaks English and knows the city better than anyone. Adrian set her luggage inside the room. Get some rest. We'll talk when you wake up. He started to leave, but Savannah caught his arm. Adrian, thank you for all of this. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then back up at her face. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and her heart stuttered with anticipation and uncertainty in equal measure. Instead, he covered her hand with his own and said, Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen what I have planned. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Savannah alone in her beautiful new room in a city she'd never imagined visiting, with a man she barely knew and couldn't stop thinking about. She unpacked mechanically, her body running on autopilot while her mind tried to catch up with the enormity of what she'd just done. She'd left New York. She'd left her job, her apartment, her entire life, and followed a man across the world on nothing but instinct and desperation. It should have felt reckless, dangerous, wrong. Instead, standing at the window and watching Soul wake up below her, Savannah felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like herself. Savannah woke 12 hours later to the sound of rain against the windows and the smell of coffee drifting through the apartment. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed too comfortable, the light too different, the sounds of the city below unfamiliar. Then memory flooded back, and she sat up abruptly, her heart racing. Soul. She was in Seoul, with Adrian Cross. She found him in the kitchen, dressed in dark slacks and a charcoal sweater, reading something on his phone while he waited for the coffee maker to finish its cycle. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression softened. "Good morning. Or evening, technically. You slept through most of the day." Jet lag is real. Savannah perched on one of the bar stools, suddenly aware that she was wearing pajama shorts and an oversized t-shirt, her hair probably a disaster. "Is that coffee for me?" "It can be." He poured 2 cups, sliding one across the counter to her. "How do you take it?" "Black. I gave up on cream and sugar years ago when I realized they just made me feel guilty." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. "Let me guess. Someone made a comment about calories." "My mother and my sister. And basically every woman in my family for as long as I can remember." Savannah wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "It's fine. I'm used to it." "It's not fine, and you shouldn't be used to it." He leaned against the counter, studying her. "How do you feel?" "Disoriented, nervous, like I'm waiting for someone to tell me this was all a mistake and I need to go home." "No one's going to tell you that. You're here because you chose to be. Everything that happens next is also your choice." The certainty in his voice steadied something inside her. "What happens next?" "That depends. Are you hungry? Because I know a place that makes the best bibimbap in the city, and you haven't experienced Seoul until you've eaten properly." 30 minutes later, Savannah found herself in the back of Adrian's car, watching the city blur past in a kaleidoscope of neon and movement. Jinho drove with calm efficiency, while Adrian pointed out landmarks. Namsan Tower glowing on the hill, the Han River cutting through the city like a silver ribbon, neighborhoods that each had their own distinct character and energy. The restaurant was tucked down a narrow street in Insadong, small and unpretentious, with steam fogging the windows. Inside, the warmth hit them immediately, along with the mouth-watering scent of sizzling meat and fermented vegetables. Adrian spoke to the owner in what sounded like fluent Korean, and the woman's face lit up with recognition and pleasure. "You come here often?" Savannah asked as they were led to a corner table. "Often enough that Mrs. Kim knows my order and scolds me when I don't visit for too long." He smiled slightly. "She also tries to set me up with her daughter every time I'm here, so fair warning if she starts showing you photos." The food arrived in waves: crispy pajeon, spicy tteokbokki, and finally the bibimbap Adrian had promised, the stone bowl still sizzling, the egg yolk golden and perfect on top of the rice and vegetables. Savannah mixed it all together the way Adrian showed her, and when she took the first bite, she understood why he'd insisted on coming here. "This is incredible," she said, already reaching for more. "Seoul has a way of surprising people. Most visitors stick to the tourist areas and think they've seen the city. But the real Seoul is in places like this, family restaurants and late-night markets and neighborhoods where people actually live. You love it here." "I do. Chicago made me who I am, but Seoul let me become who I wanted to be. No one here cares about my past or where I came from. They only care about what I can do now." Savannah set down her chopsticks, studying him. "What exactly is it that you do, Adrian? You said import-export, but that covers a lot of ground." He'd been expecting the question. She could see it in the way he didn't hesitate. "I facilitate transactions between parties who can't or won't deal with each other directly. Sometimes it's perfectly legal. A company in Japan needs rare earth metals from Mongolia. I arrange it. Sometimes it exists in gray areas. Someone in Seoul needs something moved across borders that the authorities would rather stayed put. I make it happen. And sometimes, he paused, sometimes it's the kind of work that requires absolute discretion and a willingness to take risks that would terrify most people. You're talking about smuggling, among other things. He held her gaze steadily. I won't lie to you about what I am, Savannah. I'm not a good man by conventional standards, but I'm honest about who I am, and I keep my word, always. She should have been shocked, should have been making plans to leave, to get on the next flight home, to run from whatever darkness he was involved in. Instead, she found herself asking, is it dangerous? It can be. I have enemies, people who would hurt me if they could, and people who would hurt anyone close to me to get to me. His voice was level, matter of fact. That's why I need you to understand what being here means. If we're seen together too often, if people start to think you matter to me, you become a target. I can protect you, but only if you're honest with me about where you go and who you talk to. You're saying I'm not free to just wander the city on my own. I'm saying you're free to do whatever you want. But freedom comes with risk, and I need you to be aware of what those risks are. He reached across the table and took her hand. I don't want to control you, Savannah, but I do want to keep you safe. The touch of his hand sent electricity up her arm. This is a lot to process. I know. That's why I'm telling you now, before things go any further. You can leave tomorrow if you want. I'll put you on a plane, give you enough money to start over somewhere else, and we'll part as friends. Or you can stay, knowing exactly who I am and what I do, and we'll figure out what this is together. Savannah looked down at their joined hands. His grip was firm, but not tight, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. She could feel the calluses on his fingers, the strength in his hands, the heat of his skin against hers. I'm tired of safe, she heard herself say. I've spent my whole life being careful and appropriate and doing what everyone expected. And where did it get me? Standing at my sister's wedding to my ex-fiancé, being torn apart by strangers online, feeling invisible in my own life. She looked up and met his eyes. Maybe danger is exactly what I need right now. Something blazed in Adrian's expression. Triumph, desire, possessiveness, all tangled together. Careful, Savannah. I might start to think you're actually as brave as I believe you are. Maybe I am, or maybe I'm just tired of being afraid. They finished dinner in a charged silence, the air between them thick with possibility and the weight of decisions being made. When they emerged back onto the street, the rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and gleaming under the streetlights. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and Savannah saw his expression shift, the warmth draining away, replaced by something cold and calculating. I need to take care of something, he said. Jin Ho will drive you back to the apartment. Is everything all right? It will be. He signaled to Jin Ho, who pulled the car up to the curb. I'll be home late. Don't wait up! Before she could respond, he was walking away, already on his phone, his voice low and rapid in Korean. Savannah watched him disappear around a corner, feeling suddenly adrift. The drive back to the apartment was quiet. Jin Ho seemed to sense she didn't want conversation, instead turning on soft jazz that filled the silence. Back in the empty apartment, Savannah found herself restless. She tried reading, tried watching television, tried anything to quiet the questions racing through her mind. What exactly had Adrian gotten called away for? Was he in danger? Was someone else? And why did she care so much about a man she'd known for less than a week? She was still awake at 2 in the morning when she heard the apartment door open. Footsteps in the hallway, then water running in what she assumed was Adrian's bathroom. Savannah debated going to check on him, then decided against it. If he'd wanted her company, he would have asked for it. But 20 minutes later, there was a soft knock on her bedroom door. Savannah? Are you awake? She opened the door to find Adrian leaning against the frame, still dressed, but with his shirt untucked and his hair disheveled. There was a cut on his cheekbone, already cleaned but still red, and his knuckles were scraped. What happened to you? She reached for his hand without thinking, examining the damage. Business disagreement. It's handled. He didn't pull away from her touch, instead watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I shouldn't have come to your room. I should have just gone to bed. But I wanted to make sure you were all right. I'm fine. You're the one who looks like you got in a fight. Minor altercation. The other guy looks worse. He said it so casually that Savannah felt a chill run down her spine. Does that scare you, knowing that I hurt someone tonight? She should say yes, should step back, close the door, put distance between herself and whatever darkness lived inside him. Instead, she pulled him into her room and closed the door behind them. Sit, she ordered, pointing to the bed. Let me clean those cuts properly. She went to the bathroom and returned with the first aid kit she'd found earlier, settling beside him on the bed. Up close, she could see other marks. A bruise forming along his jaw, scratches on his neck. Whatever had happened tonight, it had been violent. This is going to sting, she warned, dabbing antiseptic on his cheekbone. Adrian didn't flinch. I've had worse. That's not reassuring. She worked carefully, cleaning each cut and scrape with gentle precision. Do you get in fights often? Only when negotiation fails. I prefer words to violence, but some people only understand force. And tonight, those people needed to understand force. They needed to understand that crossing me has consequences. His hand came up to rest on her waist, anchoring her. They also needed to understand that anyone under my protection is untouchable. Savannah's hands stilled. Was this about me? Indirectly. Word got out that I brought someone to Seoul with me. Certain parties wanted to know if you were a weakness they could exploit. His eyes were hard, dangerous. I made it very clear that touching you would be the last mistake they ever made. The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed her. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in her belly. You barely know me. I know enough. And what I don't know yet, I intend to learn. His thumb traced slow circles on her hip through the thin fabric of her pajamas. Tell me to leave, Savannah. Tell me to go back to my room and we'll pretend this conversation never happened. She knew what he was really asking. This was a line they were approaching, a point of no return. If she sent him away now, they could maintain the fiction that this was just a temporary arrangement, that she was here to heal and nothing more. But if she asked him to stay, I don't want you to leave, she whispered. Adrian's eyes darkened. Be sure, because if I stay, things change between us. I can't look at you the way I am right now and keep my distance. I can't touch you and pretend it doesn't mean everything. Then stop pretending. Savannah set aside the first aid kit and turned to face him fully. I'm tired of everyone in my life pretending. Pretending my sister didn't betray me. Pretending I'm fine when I'm not. Pretending I don't feel what I feel. She reached up and traced the line of his jaw, careful to avoid the bruise. I feel something when I'm with you, something I've never felt before, and I'm tired of being too scared to reach for what I want. What do you want, Savannah? You. This. Whatever this is between us, I want to see where it goes. Adrian moved with the controlled grace of a predator, shifting so that she was beneath him on the bed, his body caging hers. He braced himself on his forearms, keeping his weight off her but close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the coiled tension in his muscles. You have no idea what you're asking for, he said, his voice rough. Then show me. He kissed her like he'd been starving for it, like he'd been holding himself back from the moment he saw her on that balcony in Rome, and finally, the leash had snapped. His mouth was demanding, possessive, claiming her with an intensity that made her head spin and her body arch against him. Savannah had been kissed before. She'd been touched, desired, wanted, but this was different. Adrian kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, like he could pour all his carefully controlled intensity into this one point of contact and remake her from the inside out. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, and Savannah felt like she'd been struck by lightning. I meant what I said in New York, Adrian said, his forehead resting against hers. I'm going to show you exactly how extraordinary you are. I'm going to make you see yourself the way I see you. And when you finally believe it, when you finally understand your own worth, you're going to be unstoppable. That sounds like a promise. It is. He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. Stay with me, Savannah. Not because you're running from your old life, but because you're running toward something better, toward yourself. She pulled him closer, losing herself in the heat and the darkness and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of becoming someone new, someone who took up space, someone who mattered, someone who was seen. The next few weeks unfolded like a fever dream. Adrian kept his word about showing her soul. They ate at hole-in-the-wall restaurants and walked through ancient palaces, visited cutting-edge art galleries and traditional markets where vendors sold everything from silk to live octopus. He introduced her to his world carefully, teaching her how to read the subtle power dynamics in every room they entered, how to recognize danger before it became a threat, how to carry herself like someone who belonged. And at night, in the privacy of his apartment, he taught her other things. How to ask for what she wanted without apologizing. How to take up space without shrinking. How to exist in her own skin without constantly calculating how much room she was allowed to occupy. They didn't sleep together, not in the final sense, and Savannah understood that Adrian was waiting for her to be ready, to choose him from a place of strength rather than desperation. But they grew closer in ways that felt more intimate than sex, learning each other's rhythms and histories, sharing truths in the dark that neither of them had spoken aloud before. But the outside world refused to stay outside forever. It started with the photos. Someone had spotted them at a restaurant in Gangnam, and within hours the images were circulating online. The headlines were predictable. Jilted sister finds comfort in mystery man's arms. From Rome to Seoul, Savannah Hayes' international romance. Savannah tried to ignore it, but the attention only intensified. Her Instagram was flooded with messages, some supportive, many cruel, all of them treating her life like a reality show they were entitled to comment on. Her mother called 17 times in one day. Emily sent increasingly frantic texts begging her to come home, to talk, to explain what she was doing. Adrian watched the storm building with the detached concern of someone who'd weathered far worse. "We can shut this down," he said one evening, finding her staring at her laptop screen with tears in her eyes. "One phone call and I can make these sites take down the photos. A few more calls and the story dies completely." "How?" "I have influence in places that matter. Leverage over people who control what gets published and what disappears." He closed her laptop gently. "Say the word and I'll make this go away." Savannah wanted to say yes, wanted him to wave his hand and erase the ugliness, the invasion, the strangers picking apart her choices. But something stopped her. "No," she said finally. "Let them talk. I'm tired of hiding from judgment. If they want to make me a story, fine. But I'm not going to let their opinion change what I'm doing or who I'm becoming." Pride flickered in Adrian's eyes. "You're learning." "I had a good teacher." The attention reached a crescendo when a tabloid published a feature that painted Adrian as everything from a wealthy playboy to a dangerous criminal, with Savannah cast as either his naive victim or his willing accomplice. The article included interviews with unnamed sources who claimed to know Adrian's business dealings, complete with speculation about everything from money laundering to arms trading. Most of it was exaggeration or outright fiction, but enough of it was close to the truth that Savannah felt genuine fear for the first time since arriving in Seoul. "Is any of this real?" she asked, handing him the article. Adrian scanned it quickly, his expression unchanging. "Some of it. They've gotten creative with the details, but the basic framework is accurate. I do move money across borders in ways that governments don't like. I do facilitate deals that exist in legal gray areas. And yes, I have been investigated by at least 3 international agencies, though none of them have been able to make anything stick." "Because you're careful. Because I'm very good at what I do." He set the article aside. "Does this change things for you?" "I don't know. Maybe." Savannah wrapped her arms around herself. "It's one thing to know abstractly that you're involved in dangerous business. It's another to see it printed in black and white with your name attached." "Then ask me whatever you need to ask. I'll tell you the truth." She wanted to ask if he'd ever killed anyone, wanted to ask if the violence he'd engaged in went beyond the bar fight in that alley, wanted to ask if loving him, because that's what this was becoming, she could feel it taking root in her chest like something inevitable and terrifying, would eventually destroy her. Instead, she asked, "Have you ever hurt someone who didn't deserve it?" "No." The answer was immediate and certain. "I've done things I'm not proud of. I've crossed lines that most people wouldn't. But I've never hurt anyone innocent. The people I deal with know the game we're playing. They accept the risks. And me? Did I accept the risks when I came here? You accepted some of them. The attention, the judgment, the possibility that being with me would complicate your life." He moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. "But I never wanted you to be afraid of me, Savannah. If that's what's happening, if you're looking at me now and seeing a monster, Tell me. I'll put you on a plane tonight. No questions, no recriminations, just a clean break. Savannah leaned into his touch, her mind racing. Was she afraid of him? No, not of Adrian himself, but she was afraid of what loving him might cost, of the world she was entering, of the person she might have to become to survive in it. I'm not afraid of you, she said finally, but I'm afraid of losing myself in all of this. The attention, the danger, the intensity of whatever this is between us, it's overwhelming, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to handle it. You're stronger than you think. You've already survived being torn apart by strangers and rebuilt yourself in a foreign city. You've walked into my world knowing it was dangerous and decided you wanted to stay anyway. His thumb traced her cheekbone. That takes a kind of courage most people don't have. Or it takes being so broken that danger feels safer than going home. Maybe both, but you're not broken, Savannah. You're just finally allowing yourself to be whole. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that she was becoming someone stronger, braver, more herself. But that night, alone in her room, she found herself searching Adrian's name online, falling down rabbit holes of speculation and accusation, each article painting him as progressively more dangerous. By 3 a.m, she'd found a blog post that made her blood run cold. It was written by someone claiming to be a former associate of Adrian's, detailing a woman who'd gotten too close to him years ago. According to the post, when the woman had tried to leave, Adrian had systematically destroyed her life, ruined her career, isolated her from friends and family, and ensured that she could never escape his sphere of influence. The post included photos. A beautiful woman with dark hair and scared eyes, looking over her shoulder like she was being followed. The caption read, "She thought she could walk away. She was wrong." Savannah's hands were shaking as she closed her laptop. It could be lies. The internet was full of people making up stories about powerful men. But what if it wasn't? What if this was who Adrian really was? Not the man who kissed her like she was precious, but the one who destroyed anyone who tried to leave him? She didn't sleep that night, and when morning came, she made a decision that felt both necessary and impossible. She had to leave. Not forever, maybe, but long enough to get perspective, to figure out if what she felt for Adrian was real or just the intoxication of being wanted by someone powerful. Long enough to see if she could stand on her own 2 feet without him there to catch her. Jinho drove her to the airport without questions, his expression carefully neutral when she asked him not to tell Adrian where she was going. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter, brief and to the point. "I need time to think. I'm going home. Please don't follow me." The flight to New York felt endless. Savannah spent most of it staring out the window, watching clouds stream past, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or the smartest decision she'd ever made. When she landed at JFK, her phone buzzed with a single text from Adrian. "You're free to go anywhere, anytime, but know that I'll be waiting when you're ready to come back." No anger, no recriminations, just acceptance and the promise that he'd still be there. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it made her cry in the middle of the airport, overwhelmed by the realization that she'd just walked away from the first person who'd ever made her feel truly seen. Zoe picked her up from the airport, took one look at her face, and drove straight to her apartment without asking questions. Once inside, with wine poured and Thai food ordered, Savannah finally broke down and told her everything. Adrian's business, the growing media attention, the blog post about the woman he'd supposedly destroyed, her fear that she was falling for someone who might be dangerous. "Okay," Zoe said when she'd finished. "Let's think about this logically. Do you actually believe Adrian would hurt you?" "No, but I believe Marcus would never leave me. And look how that turned out." "That's not the same thing, and you know it. Marcus was a coward who chose the easier path. Adrian flew across the world because you asked him to. He's been nothing but honest with you about who he is. That's the opposite of Marcus." "But what if the blog post is true? What if there really was a woman who tried to leave and he ruined her life?" Zoe pulled out her own laptop. What blog was it? Savannah navigated to the post, watching as Zoe read it carefully. When she finished, Zoe sat back with a thoughtful expression. "This is bullshit," she said finally. "How do you know?" "Because I'm a research librarian and I know how to spot fake sources. Look." She pointed to the byline. "Anonymous author. No verifiable details about who wrote it or when. The photos have no metadata, no source attribution. The former associate doesn't give their name or any specific details that could be verified. And look at the comments. They're all from accounts created within the last month, probably sock puppets agreeing with the narrative. But it could still be true. It could be. But so could any random accusation someone makes on the internet. Without evidence, it's just a story someone wrote to get clicks. Zoe closed the laptop. Here's what I think. I think you got scared, which is completely understandable. You went from one extreme to another in a matter of weeks. But instead of talking to Adrian about your fears, you ran, just like you've been running from difficult conversations your whole life. The observation stung because it was accurate. I left him a note saying you needed time to think, not a note explaining what scared you or giving him a chance to address it. You just disappeared. Zoe softened her voice. Look, I don't know if Adrian is a good guy or a bad guy or something in between, but I do know that he's been honest with you from the start, and you owe him the same honesty in return. Savannah spent the next 2 days holed up in her apartment, trying to convince herself that coming home had been the right decision. She avoided her family, ignored the emails from her boss asking when she'd be back to work, and spent hours staring at her phone, debating whether to call Adrian. On the third day, her father showed up at her door. Savannah. He pulled her into a hug before she could say anything. Your mother said you were back. Why didn't you call? I needed some space. He came inside, settling into her couch with the weariness of someone who'd been fighting an uphill battle. I owe you an apology. Several, actually. But mainly for not standing up for you when Emily and Marcus decided to get married. I should have told them it was wrong. I should have protected you instead of worrying about keeping the peace. Savannah felt tears prick her eyes. Dad, let me finish. I've watched you spend your whole life making yourself smaller so everyone else could feel bigger. I watched Emily take and take and take, and I told myself it was fine because you seemed okay with it. But you weren't okay, and I should have seen that. He reached for her hand. When you left for Seoul, your mother was furious, but I was proud. Finally, you were choosing yourself. I don't know if I was choosing myself or just running away. Maybe both. But either way, you stopped letting other people's expectations control you. That takes strength. He paused. Your mother wants you to come to Sunday dinner. Emily will be there. She wants to talk to you. I can't. Not yet. I understand, but Savannah, at some point you're going to have to decide what kind of relationship you want with your family going forward. We can't keep pretending everything is fine. It's not fine. It hasn't been fine for a long time. After he left, Savannah sat with his words, feeling something shift inside her. He was right. She'd spent so long avoiding conflict, smoothing over hurt feelings, accepting unacceptable behavior because confrontation felt too hard. But she wasn't that person anymore. Seoul had changed her. Adrian had changed her. She'd learned what it felt like to take up space, to be seen, to matter. And she couldn't go back to being invisible. That night, she finally called Adrian. He answered on the first ring, his voice steady and warm and achingly familiar. Savannah. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have left like that. Without explaining, without giving you a chance to... You don't need to apologize for needing space. I told you from the beginning, this only works if it's your choice. I saw something online, a blog post about a woman you supposedly destroyed when she tried to leave you, and I got scared. Silence on the other end. Then, her name was Victoria Chen. We were engaged 7 years ago. When she ended things, I was hurt and angry, and I made some phone calls I shouldn't have made. Nothing illegal, nothing violent, but I used my influence to make her life difficult for about 6 months. I'm not proud of it. It's probably the thing I regret most in my life. The honesty of it took her breath away. What happened to her? Eventually, I came to my senses and apologized. I undid what damage I could and left her alone. Last I heard, she was married to a lawyer in Singapore and very happy. We don't speak, but I hope she's doing well. The blog post made it sound like you ruined her completely. The blog post was written by someone who wants to damage my reputation. Victoria would tell you I behaved badly, but not that I destroyed her life. She's too honest for that. He paused. Is that what scared you, that I might do the same to you? Part of it. The other part was just being overwhelmed by how intense everything is with you. I've never felt like this before. It's exhilarating and terrifying, and I don't know how to handle it. So you ran. So I ran, she admitted, which is what I always do when things get too real. What do you want to do now? The question was simple, but the answer felt impossibly complex. What did she want? To go back to Seoul in Adrian's arms and the life she'd been building there? To stay in New York and try to rebuild bridges with her family? To find some impossible middle ground where she could have both? I don't know, she whispered. I just know I miss you, and I'm tired of running. Then come back. Not because I'm asking, but because it's where you want to be. What if I'm not ready? Then wait until you are. I'm not going anywhere, Savannah. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. They talked for another hour, and by the time Savannah hung up, something had settled inside her. She wasn't ready to go back to Seoul yet, but she was ready to stop running from herself. The next Sunday, she went to her family's dinner. Walking into her parents' house felt like entering a museum of her former life. Everything was exactly as she remembered, the photos on the mantel tracking Emily's successes while Savannah remained carefully positioned in the background, the dining room where she'd sat through countless dinners making herself smaller, the living room where her mother had explained that sometimes love just happened and you couldn't control who your heart chose. Her mother answered the door, and Savannah saw the flash of relief quickly masked by controlled composure. Savannah, you came. I said I would. Linda stepped aside to let her in, and Savannah caught the way her mother's eyes catalogued her appearance. The weight she'd lost in Seoul, the different way she held herself, the confidence that hadn't been there before. Something flickered in Linda's expression that might have been approval or might have been concern. Everyone's in the dining room. Emily's been hoping you'd... She paused. She wants to talk to you. I'm sure she does. Her father was setting the table when she entered, and his face lit up with genuine warmth. Emily sat in the corner with Marcus, and Savannah watched her sister's expression transform from nervous anticipation to something more complex when their eyes met. Savannah, Emily stood, smoothing her dress in that unconscious gesture she had had since childhood. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either. Savannah took the seat her father indicated, deliberately choosing one that put the table between her and Emily. But Dad convinced me it was time to stop avoiding difficult conversations. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, and Savannah felt a savage satisfaction at his discomfort. Good. Let him squirm. Let him remember that his choices had consequences, even if everyone else wanted to pretend they didn't. Dinner started with forced pleasantries and careful avoidance of anything substantial. Her mother talked about the charity gala she was planning. Her father discussed his golf game. Emily picked at her food and sent nervous glances in Savannah's direction, while Marcus focused on his plate with laser intensity. Finally, over dessert, Emily broke. I can't do this anymore. I can't just sit here and pretend everything's normal when it's not. She turned to face Savannah directly. I need you to know how sorry I am, for everything. For falling in love with Marcus, for not telling you sooner, for letting the wedding happen the way it did. I never wanted to hurt you. Savannah set down her fork carefully. But you did hurt me, Emily. You knew exactly what you were doing when you started texting him in Paris. You knew what it would mean when you showed up at family dinners looking perfect and asking him thoughtful questions, and you did it anyway. I tried not to. I tried so hard not to feel what I felt, but what? You just couldn't help yourself? Savannah felt the anger she'd been suppressing for months bubble to the surface. You're not a child, Emily. You had choices. You chose to pursue a man you knew I was engaged to. You chose to let it continue even when you saw it was destroying me. And then you chose to have a fairy tale wedding and expect me to smile and be gracious about it. Savannah. Her mother's voice held a warning note. No, Mom. You asked me to come here. You wanted this conversation, so let me finish. Savannah kept her eyes on Emily. I spent my entire life being compared to you and coming up short. I was never pretty enough, never thin enough, never quite enough of anything to matter as much as you did. And I accepted it because I loved you, and I thought that was just how families worked. But then you took the one thing that was mine, the one relationship where someone had chosen me first, and you took it anyway. Because you could. Because you've always been able to take whatever you wanted, and there's never been a consequence. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I love him, Savannah. I know that doesn't make it right, but I love him. And he loves me. We didn't plan for this to happen. Maybe not, but you let it happen, and that's the part I can't forgive. Savannah stood, her hands steady despite the emotion churning in her chest. I came here tonight because I needed to tell you this to your face instead of running away from it. You hurt me in a way I'm not sure I'll ever completely get over, and I need you to acknowledge that instead of making excuses about love just happening. I do acknowledge it. Emily was crying openly now. I know I hurt you. I know I was selfish, and I'm so sorry. Are you sorry enough to have made a different choice if you could do it over? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Emily opened her mouth, closed it, glanced at Marcus. And in that hesitation, Savannah had her answer. That's what I thought. Savannah picked up her purse. I'm glad you're happy, Emily. I really am. But I can't be around you right now. Maybe not for a long time. Because every time I look at you, I see the person who taught me that even my own sister thought I was disposable. Savannah, please don't go. Emily reached for her, but Savannah stepped back. I need to go. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for this family, when I'm not making myself smaller so everyone else can feel bigger. She looked at her mother. You wanted me to come to Sunday dinner and pretend everything was fine, but it's not fine. It won't be fine for a long time, and I'm done pretending. She left before anyone could respond, her heart pounding, but her head clear. She'd spent so long being afraid of conflict, of disappointing people, of causing scenes. But standing up for herself, naming the hurt instead of swallowing it, that felt like breathing for the first time in years. Zoe was waiting outside in her car, as promised. She took one look at Savannah's face and handed her a bottle of water. How bad was it? Terrible and perfect at the same time. I told them everything I've been holding back for months. Years, maybe. Savannah twisted the cap off the water bottle. Emily asked if I could forgive her. I told her I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. How do you feel? Lighter? Scared? Like I just burned down a bridge I've been standing on my whole life. She took a long drink. But also like I made the right choice. I can't go back to being the person who makes everyone else comfortable at my own expense. Good. Because that person was exhausting to watch. Zoe pulled into traffic. So what now? Are you going back to Seoul? Savannah pulled out her phone and looked at the last text from Adrian. The message was 2 days old. Thinking of you. Take all the time you need. She typed a response before she could second-guess herself. I'm ready to come back if the offer still stands. The reply came within seconds. The offer will always stand. I'll send you the flight details. 3 days later, Savannah was back on a plane to Seoul, but everything felt different this time. She wasn't running away from something. She was running toward what she wanted, what she'd chosen, with full knowledge of what it meant and what it would cost. Adrian was waiting when she cleared customs, and the sight of him made her breath catch. He looked exactly as she remembered. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, that contained intensity that made everyone around him fade into background noise. But when he saw her, something in his expression softened into relief and something warmer, something that looked almost like joy. Welcome home, he said, and the word hit her with unexpected force. Home. Not New York, not her apartment, not her family's house. This city, this man, this life she was choosing. I'm sorry I left, she said as they walked to the car. I got scared and I ran instead of talking to you about it. You came back, that's what matters. He held the car door open for her. Did you get what you needed in New York? I think so. I told my family how I really felt. I set boundaries. I stopped pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. She settled into the seat beside him. It was awful and necessary, and I'm glad I did it. That's growth. Adrian's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing with a familiarity that felt both new and inevitable. I'm proud of you. The words settled into her chest like warmth spreading through cold water. When was the last time someone had been proud of her for being honest instead of for being accommodating? When had anyone celebrated her setting boundaries instead of asking her to be more understanding? Back at the apartment, Savannah found that Adrian had left everything exactly as it was when she'd fled. Her room untouched, her belongings in place, as if he'd known all along that she would come back. I wasn't sure you would return, he admitted over dinner that night. But I hoped, so I made sure you'd have a home to come back to if you chose to. What would you have done if I'd stayed in New York? Waited. Given you space. Eventually moved on, maybe, though I'm not sure I could have. He set down his chopsticks and looked at her directly. I told you in New York that I'm not built for half measures. That's still true. If we're doing this, really doing this, I need to know you're all in. Not running anymore, not second-guessing every time things get hard. I'm all in, Savannah said, and felt the truth of it resonate through her entire body. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Choosing to see where this goes. Even knowing what I am, what my world looks like. Especially knowing that you've never lied to me about who you are. That's more than most people in my life have given me. Adrian reached across the table and pulled her to him, the kiss deep and claiming and full of the promise that had been building between them since Rome. When they finally broke apart, Savannah was breathless and dizzy and absolutely certain. Stay with me tonight, he said. Not in your room. With me. This time there was no hesitation, no fear. Savannah let him lead her to his bedroom, let him undress her with reverent hands and kiss every inch of skin he revealed. He made love to her like she was something precious and powerful all at once, like he'd been waiting his entire life to touch her exactly like this. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Savannah felt more herself than she'd ever felt before. This was what it meant to be chosen. Not as a consolation prize or a convenient option, but as the only choice that mattered. The next few weeks were a masterclass in intensity. Adrian pulled her deeper into his world. Not the dangerous parts, not yet, but the edges where power met pleasure and influence was currency. She met his associates at elegant dinners where conversations carried 3 meanings and every gesture was calculated. She learned to read the room the way he did, understanding who held real power versus who just looked like they did. And she thrived. The woman who'd spent her life being overlooked discovered that when she stopped apologizing for existing, people paid attention. Adrian taught her how to leverage that attention, how to use it without being used by it. He introduced her to designers who created clothes that made her feel powerful instead of apologetic, took her to events where her presence beside him sent clear messages about her importance, showed her what it felt like to matter. But the idyll couldn't last forever. It shattered on a Tuesday evening when they returned to the apartment to find it had been broken into. Nothing was taken. That was what made it terrifying. Everything was exactly where it should be, except for a single photograph placed deliberately on the coffee table. The photograph showed Savannah leaving a cafe 3 days earlier, alone, unaware she was being watched. Someone had drawn a red X over her face. Adrian's expression went cold and deadly in a way Savannah had never seen before. He pulled out his phone and made 3 calls in rapid Korean, his voice clipped and furious. Then he turned to her with carefully controlled calm. Pack a bag, we're leaving. Now. Adrian, what's happening? Someone's sending me a message. They're telling me they can get to you whenever they want. He was already moving through the apartment, checking windows, examining locks. I need to get you somewhere safe while I handle this. Handle it how? However I need to. He stopped, seeming to realize how that sounded. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you, Savannah, but that means I need to eliminate the threat, and that's going to get ugly. Savannah thought about running, about getting on a plane back to New York and leaving this world of threats and broken-into apartments, and men who spoke casually about eliminating problems. But she'd promised herself she was done running, and more than that, she'd promised Adrian she was all in. Tell me what you need me to do. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or respect. I need you to go with Jinho to a safe house outside the city. Stay there until I come for you. Don't open the door for anyone else. Don't make any calls. Don't tell anyone where you are. How long? I don't know. A few days at most. He pulled her against him, the embrace fierce and protective. I know this is frightening, but I've dealt with threats before. I know how to handle this. Who's doing this? Why? Someone who thinks you're my weakness. Someone who wants to see if threatening you will make me negotiate. His hand curved around the back of her neck, holding her close. They're about to learn that threatening you makes me vengeful. Jinho drove her to a house in the countryside, 2 hours from Seoul, while Adrian disappeared into the night to do whatever violent, necessary things he did when people crossed him. The safe house was small but comfortable, stocked with food and books, and everything she might need for an extended stay. But Savannah couldn't focus on any of it. She paced the rooms, checking her phone every 5 minutes, imagining every terrible scenario. What if Adrian was hurt? What if whoever had broken into the apartment found this place? What if this was the moment where his dangerous world finally consumed her? The first night passed without word, then the second. By the third day, Savannah was climbing the walls with anxiety. She'd called Adrian 17 times, but every call went straight to voicemail. Jinho assured her everything was fine, that this was normal, that Adrian would come when it was safe. But nothing about this felt normal or safe. On the fourth morning, she woke to the sound of a car in the driveway. Savannah grabbed the kitchen knife Jinho had left for her, just in case, he'd said, and positioned herself behind the door. The key turned in the lock. The door opened. Adrian stepped inside, and Savannah felt her knees go weak with relief. He looked exhausted and dangerous, his clothes rumpled, a bruise darkening his jaw. But he was alive. He was here. "It's over," he said simply. Savannah dropped the knife and threw herself into his arms. He caught her easily, burying his face in her hair. "What happened?" she asked when she could form words. "The people who threatened you won't be threatening anyone again. I made very clear what the consequences are for touching what's mine." The possessiveness should have bothered her. Instead, it made her feel claimed and protected and utterly certain that Adrian would walk through fire before he let anyone hurt her. "Did you?" She couldn't finish the question. "I did what needed to be done. Nothing you need to carry." He pulled back to look at her. "This is why I warned you in New York. This is the reality of my world. People will try to use you to get to me, and I will destroy them for it, every time." "I'm not scared of you," Savannah said fiercely. "I'm scared for you. What if next time they don't just break in and leave a photo? What if they— Then I'll handle it, like I always do." He cupped her face in his hands. "But Savannah, you need to understand something. Being with me means living with this risk. It means looking over your shoulder. It means some days I'll disappear to handle things I can't explain, and you'll have to trust that I'll come back. If that's not a life you can live with, tell me now. I'll protect you regardless, but I won't ask you to stay in a situation that terrifies you." She thought about New York, about her safe, predictable life, where the worst thing that happened was online gossip and awkward family dinners. She could go back to that. Adrian would let her go, would ensure she was safe, would probably even set her up with enough money to start over somewhere new. But she'd tasted what it felt like to be fully alive, fully seen, fully chosen, and she couldn't go back to being invisible, even if it meant accepting the danger that came with being visible to him. "I'm not leaving," she said, "but I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise you won't shut me out when things get dangerous. Don't just send me away to a safe house while you handle everything alone. If we're in this together, we're in it together. I need to know what's happening, even if I can't help. I need to be part of your life, not just protected from it." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and Savannah saw the war playing out behind his eyes. He was a man used to controlling everything, to bearing burdens alone, to protecting people by keeping them distant from the darkness. "That's going to be hard for me," he admitted finally. "Every instinct I have says to shield you from the ugliest parts of what I do. I'm not asking you to make me part of your operations. I'm asking you not to treat me like I'm fragile. I've proven I'm not. I flew across the world with you. I came back after running away. I stayed in a safe house for 4 days, not knowing if you were alive or dead. I can handle more than you think." "I'm starting to see that." He kissed her forehead. "All right, no more shutting you out. But in exchange, you have to promise that if I tell you something is too dangerous, you'll trust my judgment. I've been navigating this world for 15 years. I know when a situation is manageable and when it's not." "Deal." They went back to Seoul the next day, to an apartment that had been swept for bugs and fitted with upgraded security. Adrian had assigned additional protection, men who appeared and disappeared like shadows, always watching, always vigilant. It should have felt oppressive. Instead, it felt like proof that he meant what he'd said. No one would touch her, not while he was alive to prevent it. But the attack had changed something fundamental. The media attention, which had been dying down, suddenly exploded again. Someone had leaked information about the break-in, carefully edited to make it sound like Savannah was in danger because of Adrian's criminal activities. The headlines were vicious. "American woman in peril, dating a crime boss has consequences." Savannah Hayes trapped in dangerous romance. The worst part was the comments from people who'd previously been on her side. The ones who'd defended her during the wedding scandal now turned on her, saying she'd brought this on herself by getting involved with someone obviously dangerous. Her mother called, crying and begging her to come home. Emily sent a long email detailing all the ways this relationship was going to destroy her. And then the death threats started. They came through email, social media, even physical mail forwarded from her New York address. Most were generic, strangers online who felt entitled to an opinion about her life. But some were specific enough to be frightening. People who knew where she'd been, what she'd done, details that should have been private. Adrian wanted to shut it all down, to use his influence to erase her online presence completely. But Savannah refused. "If I let them scare me into hiding, they win," she said. "I'm tired of being bullied into making myself smaller. If people want to hate me, fine, but I'm not going to apologize for choosing my own life." Even if choosing your own life puts you in danger? You said yourself, the danger comes from your enemies, not from random internet trolls. And you're handling your enemies. She squeezed his hand. "I can handle some ugly comments online." But it wasn't just comments. 3 weeks after the break-in, Savannah received a package. Inside was a photo of her and Adrian at dinner the night before, taken through the restaurant window. On the back, someone had written, "She won't last." They never do. Adrian went quiet and dangerous when he saw it. This isn't random. Someone is watching you specifically, someone who knows our routines. What does that mean? It means there's a leak. Someone close to us is feeding information to people who want to hurt me through you. His eyes were cold with calculation. I'm going to find out who, and when I do, Adrian. Savannah caught his face, forcing him to look at her. Don't become the monster they think you are, just to protect me. I'm already the monster, Savannah. I've just been pretending to be civilized for your benefit. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they crystallized something she'd been feeling but hadn't named. Adrian was dangerous. He operated outside the law, controlled things through force and influence, and had built his empire on the kind of moral flexibility that most people condemned. But he was also the only person who'd ever looked at her and seen someone worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth burning the world down to keep safe. She kissed him hard, pouring everything she felt into it. The fear and the certainty, the love and the understanding that loving him meant accepting all of him, even the parts that scared her. Then be the monster, she whispered against his mouth. Just come back to me when you're done. He left that night, taking 3 of his most trusted men and disappearing into whatever shadows he operated in. And Savannah waited, no longer naive enough to think waiting was passive or weak. Waiting was its own kind of strength. Trusting him to come back was its own kind of bravery. 2 days later, he returned. He didn't tell her what he'd done or who he'd hurt. But the photos stopped coming, the threats dried up. And when she asked if it was over, he simply said, "For now." Because that was the reality of his world. There would always be another threat, another challenge, another person who thought they could use her to hurt him. But he would handle it, every time. And she would be there when he came back, every time. That night, wrapped in his arms, Savannah realized something that should have terrified her, but instead felt like the truest thing she'd ever known. She loved him, not despite his darkness, but inclusive of it. She loved his ruthlessness and his tenderness, his violence and his protection, his willingness to destroy anyone who threatened what was his, and his absolute devotion to keeping her safe. "I love you," she said into the darkness. His arms tightened around her. "I know. I've known since you came back from New York. Maybe before that. You never said. I wanted you to see it first, to understand what it meant before I said it out loud." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I love you, Savannah Hayes. I love you enough to let you go if you asked. And I love you enough to burn down the world if anyone tries to take you from me." She believed him, on both counts. And that was when she knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever happened next, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning after their confessions, Savannah woke to find Adrian already dressed, standing at the window with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low and urgent, speaking rapid Korean that she'd started to recognize as his business tone, the one that meant something serious was happening. He ended the call and turned to find her watching him. "We have a problem." Savannah sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. What kind of problem? The kind that's been building for months. The people I've been dealing with, the ones who broke in, who sent the photos, they're not backing down. They're escalating. He crossed to the bed and sat beside her. Their leader wants a meeting, face to face, and he's insisting you be there. Me? Why would he want me there? Because he thinks you're my weakness. He wants to see if he can use you to force concessions I wouldn't otherwise make. Adrian's jaw was tight with barely controlled fury. I'm not taking you into that situation. I'll go alone. What happens if you go alone? Either we reach an agreement, or this turns into a war that will consume the next year of my life and put everyone I care about in danger. And if I go with you? Then he sees that threatening you affects me, which gives him leverage. It's a trap either way. Adrian took her hand. I need to shut this down permanently. And that means making a move he won't expect. What kind of move? He was quiet for a long moment, and Savannah saw him weighing how much to tell her versus how much to shield her from. Finally, he seemed to make a decision. I'm going to offer him a deal. Territory he's wanted for years in exchange for leaving you, leaving us, completely alone. It'll cost me, but it'll end this. What if he doesn't accept? Then I eliminate the threat permanently. He said it so calmly, like they were discussing dinner plans instead of life and death. But I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. I'm tired of this, Savannah. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of worrying about you being used against me. I want a life where we can just exist without constant threat. Is that even possible in your world? It can be, if I'm willing to make the right sacrifices and draw the right lines. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles. I built this empire by being ruthless and taking risks, but maintaining it means being smart about which battles are worth fighting. You're worth more than any territory or deal, so I'm choosing you. The meeting was set for 2 days later in a neutral location, a private room at an upscale restaurant in Gangnam. Adrian spent those 48 hours in intense preparation, making calls, moving pieces on whatever chessboard he operated on, ensuring every angle was covered. Savannah watched him work with a mixture of awe and fear. This was Adrian at his most dangerous, cold, calculating, several moves ahead of everyone else. But she also saw the toll it took, the way he barely slept, the tension that never left his shoulders. The night before the meeting, she found him in his study, surrounded by documents and maps, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. Come to bed, she said from the doorway. I need to make sure everything is perfect. One mistake and this all falls apart. You've checked everything 3 times. You know this inside and out. She crossed the room and took the papers from his hands. What you need is rest. You can't negotiate effectively if you're exhausted. He pulled her into his lap, burying his face in her neck. I can't lose you, Savannah. I've lost things before, deals, money, even people I cared about. But losing you would break something in me that I don't think could be repaired. You're not going to lose me. We're going to walk into that meeting, you're going to make your deal, and we're going to walk out together. And then we're going to build the life you talked about, the one where we get to just exist. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we've been making it complicated because we're used to fighting for everything. But what if we just decided we were done fighting? What if we just chose peace? Adrian lifted his head to look at her, and something in his expression shifted. You're right. I've been so focused on winning that I forgot the goal isn't to dominate. It's to be free. Free to live without looking over my shoulder. Free to love you without worrying about who's going to use it against me. Then let's be free. The next evening, they dressed carefully for the meeting. Adrian in a dark suit that made him look both civilized and dangerous. Savannah in a dress that Adrian had chosen. Elegant, expensive, the kind of thing that announced she belonged exactly where she was. He'd also given her a necklace, a simple platinum chain with a single diamond that caught the light. Insurance, he'd said when he fastened it around her neck. If anything goes wrong, if we get separated for any reason, you take this to Jin-ho. He'll know what to do. Nothing's going to go wrong. I know, but I need you to have an exit strategy anyway. Promise me. She'd promised, though she had no intention of leaving him regardless of what happened. The restaurant was exclusive, the kind of place where privacy was guaranteed and questions were never asked. They were led to a private room where a man waited, older than Adrian, maybe 50, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. 2 bodyguards flanked him, and Savannah felt Adrian's hand tighten slightly on her back. "Mr. Cross, thank you for coming." The man's English was perfect, his smile not reaching his eyes. "And you brought your lovely companion. How trusting of you." "Mr. Park, shall we sit?" Adrian's voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. They settled around the table, and Savannah found herself catalogued by Park's cold gaze. She met it steadily, refusing to look away or show fear. She'd learned from Adrian, showing weakness invited attack. "I'll be direct," Park said. "Your presence in Seoul has become problematic. You control territories that should be mine. You've been interfering with operations that don't concern you, and you've made enemies of people I call friends." "I've operated within the boundaries we agreed to 5 years ago," Adrian replied evenly. "If those boundaries no longer suit you, we can renegotiate." "I'm not interested in negotiation. I'm interested in you understanding that your time here is limited." Park's eyes slid to Savannah. "Especially now that you've given me such an obvious pressure point." Adrian's expression didn't change, but Savannah felt the temperature in the room drop. "Savannah is off limits. That's not negotiable." "Everything is negotiable, Mr. Cross. Surely you've learned that by now." Park leaned back in his chair. "Here's what I propose. You give me the Itaewon territories, the shipping contracts with the Nakamura Group, and your stake in the Myeongdong properties. In exchange, I allow you to continue operating in Seoul without interference." "That's more than half my business." "Yes, but you keep your life, and hers. Seems like a fair trade." Savannah watched Adrian's face, saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. This was it. The moment where he had to choose between his empire and everything else. "No," Adrian said quietly. Park's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "I said no. I'm not giving you those territories. Not for my safety, and not for hers." He leaned forward. "But I will give you something better. I'm leaving Seoul, permanently. I'll transfer all my operations to other cities, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore. You can have Seoul. All of it. The territories, the contracts, the properties, everything I've built here. In exchange for what? Safe passage out, and a guarantee that you never touch Savannah or anyone connected to me ever again. You get what you wanted, me gone from Seoul. I get what I want, freedom from this constant threat." Park studied him carefully. "You'd give up your entire operation here? Everything you've spent years building? For her?" "Yes, without hesitation." Savannah felt tears prick her eyes. He was giving up his empire, the power base he'd built, the city he loved, everything he'd worked for her, so they could be free. "That's either the most romantic gesture I've ever witnessed or the most foolish," Park said. "You understand that walking away from Seoul means losing significant influence? Other cities won't respect you the way they do here." "I'll rebuild. I've done it before." Adrian's voice was steady, certain. "Do we have a deal?" Park considered for a long moment that felt like an eternity. Then he smiled, and it was almost genuine. "You're either the smartest man I've ever met or a complete fool. But yes, we have a deal. Seoul is mine, and you walk away clean. You have 2 weeks to transfer everything." They shook hands, and Savannah felt the tension drain from Adrian's shoulders. It was done. They were free. But as they stood to leave, Park called out one more time. "Mr. Cross, a word of advice. The next city you build your empire in, don't let love make you soft. It's the one weakness no amount of power can protect against." "Love isn't my weakness," Adrian replied, his hand finding Savannah's. "It's the only thing that's ever made me strong enough to walk away from a fight I couldn't win." They left the restaurant and climbed into the car, and Savannah waited until they were safely away before she let herself react. "You gave up everything, your entire business in Seoul. For me. I gave up territory and deals and influence. None of that is everything." He pulled her close. "You're everything. And I meant what I said. I can rebuild an empire. But I can't rebuild us if something happens to you because I was too proud to make the smart choice." "Where will we go?" "Anywhere you want. Singapore has potential. Or we could go back to the States, start something new there. I have resources in a dozen cities. We can build whatever life we want." Savannah thought about New York, about the family and the baggage and the constant reminders of who she used to be. Then she thought about the woman she'd become in soul, stronger, braver, more herself than she'd ever been. Not New York, she said, somewhere new for both of us. Somewhere we can start completely fresh. Singapore, then. It's cosmopolitan, it's safe, and I have connections there who won't ask questions about our past. Over the next 2 weeks, Adrian dismantled his soul empire with the same precision he'd built it. He transferred properties, sold contracts, moved money through channels that Savannah didn't ask about, and he didn't explain. She watched him say goodbye to the city that had been his base for a decade, and she saw what it cost him. But he never hesitated, never second-guessed the choice, because he'd chosen her, and everything else was negotiable. They landed in Singapore on a warm evening, the city glittering like something out of a dream. Adrian had secured them a penthouse overlooking Marina Bay, and as Savannah stood at the window watching the light show on the water, she felt something settle inside her. This was their beginning, not the frantic escape from Rome, not the passionate chaos of soul, but something deeper, something built on choice and sacrifice, and the kind of love that didn't ask you to be smaller, but demanded you be everything you were capable of becoming. "Are you happy?" Adrian asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I'm happy. Are you? You gave up so much." "I gave up buildings and contracts and influence in one city. I gained a life with you in it. That's not even close to an equal trade. I got the better deal by far." Savannah turned in his arms to face him. "What happens now?" "Now we build something new. I'll start smaller this time, more legitimate. I'm tired of operating in shadows, tired of always looking over my shoulder. Singapore has opportunities that don't require the kind of moral flexibility Seoul did." "You're going legitimate?" "As legitimate as someone with my background can get. I'll still broker deals and facilitate connections, but I'm done with the gray areas that put you in danger. I'm done choosing power over peace." He cupped her face in his hands. "I want a life with you, Savannah. Not a life where you're constantly afraid for me or yourself. That means making different choices than I've made before." "I love you," she said, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. "I love who you are, and who you're becoming, and who you let me be when I'm with you." "Then marry me." The words were quiet but certain. "Not because I'm trying to claim you or trap you, or any of the toxic things people will probably assume, but because I want to build this life with you officially. I want everyone to know that you chose me and I chose you, and that's permanent." Savannah felt her breath catch. "Are you proposing?" "I'm telling you that I want you to be my wife. If you want that too, we'll make it happen. If you need more time, I'll wait. If you want something different entirely, we'll figure that out. But yes, I'm asking you to marry me." She thought about the last proposal she'd received. Marcus, nervous and rehearsed, down on one knee in a restaurant full of people, making a show of something that should have been intimate, asking her to marry him because it was the next logical step, because she fit into his life plan, because she was convenient and safe. Adrian wasn't asking her to fit into anything. He was asking her to build something new with him, not because she was convenient or safe, but because she'd walked into his dangerous world and refused to be intimidated by it, because she'd chosen him knowing exactly who he was, and he'd chosen her the same way. "Yes," she said, "I'll marry you, on one condition." "Name it." "We do it our way. No big wedding, no family drama, no performing for an audience. Just us, choosing each other, without all the noise." Adrian smiled, and it was the first completely unguarded smile she'd ever seen from him. "That sounds perfect." They married 3 weeks later in a private ceremony at a temple garden, with only Jin Ho and a handful of Adrian's most trusted associates as witnesses. Savannah wore a simple white dress, and Adrian wore a suit, and when they said their vows, it was the truest thing either of them had ever spoken. "I promise to see you," Adrian said, his hands holding hers. "Not the version of you that makes other people comfortable, but the real you. The brave, brilliant, sometimes reckless woman who flew across the world with a stranger because she knew staying where she was would kill something vital inside her. I promise to never ask you to be smaller, quieter, less. And I promise that if I ever do something that makes you feel invisible, you call me on it immediately, because the only person I want to be for you is someone who makes you feel seen." Savannah felt tears streaming down her face as she said her own vows. I promise to trust you, not blindly, but with full knowledge of who you are and what you're capable of. I promise to be honest with you, even when that honesty is hard to speak or hear. I promise not to run when things get difficult because running has never made anything better. And I promise to love you, not despite your darkness, but inclusive of it. Because you taught me that being seen completely, shadows and all, is the only way to truly know someone. When they kissed, it felt like sealing a pact that went deeper than marriage, deeper than law or tradition. It felt like two people who'd been lost finding home in each other. The months that followed were a revelation. Adrian rebuilt his business with surprising speed, but this time the foundation was legitimate. Investment consulting, international trade facilitation, helping companies navigate complex markets. He still had connections in the darker corners of global business, but he used them for intelligence rather than participation. And Savannah discovered she had a talent for it. The skills she'd developed reading rooms in Seoul translated perfectly to business negotiations. She could spot the power players, understand motivations, sense when someone was lying or bluffing. Adrian started bringing her to meetings, and more than once her insights had saved him from bad deals or dangerous partnerships. "You're wasted in nonprofit fundraising," he told her one evening after she'd identified a potential partner's financial instability that even his accountants had missed. "Have you ever thought about doing this professionally?" "Doing what? Reading people?" "Strategy, analysis, being the smartest person in the room." He pulled her onto his lap. "I could use a partner, in business and in life." "I thought I already was your partner." "You are. But I'm talking about making it official, cross-consulting, both our names on the door." Savannah felt something flutter in her chest. "You want me to work with you?" "I want to build something with you. Not for you, not around you, but with you as an equal partner. You're brilliant, Savannah. You see things I miss. And together, we could build something that's not just profitable, but actually makes a difference." They launched cross-consulting 6 months after their wedding, specializing in helping companies navigate international markets while maintaining ethical standards. It was harder than Adrian's previous work. Legitimate business required patience and persistence rather than intimidation and leverage. But it was also more satisfying, and Savannah thrived. The woman who'd spent her life being overlooked discovered that when people actually listened to her, she had a lot worth saying. She was brilliant at identifying market opportunities, at understanding cultural nuances, at building relationships based on mutual benefit rather than power dynamics. But Singapore, for all its opportunities, still felt temporary. They'd built a life there, but it wasn't home. Not the way Seoul had been for Adrian, not the way New York had been for Savannah before it became a cage. "I want to go back to the States," Savannah said one evening. "Not New York, somewhere new. Somewhere we can build something that's really ours." "Where are you thinking?" "San Francisco. It's cosmopolitan enough to be interesting, different enough from New York to feel like a fresh start, and the business climate is perfect for what we're doing." Adrian considered it. San Francisco works, good tech connections, international business community, far enough from your family to maintain boundaries, but close enough to visit if you want to. They moved to San Francisco 8 months after leaving Seoul, purchasing a converted loft in Soma with views of the bay. The business transferred seamlessly. Turns out companies looking for international consulting didn't care where you were based as long as you delivered results. And Savannah finally reached out to her father. The conversation was stilted at first, both of them dancing around everything that had happened. But eventually, they found their way to honesty. "I'm sorry I wasn't stronger for you," her father said. "When you needed me to stand up to your mother and Emily, I chose peace over justice. That was wrong." "I'm sorry I disappeared without really explaining why I needed to leave," Savannah replied. "I was so angry at all of you, and I handled it by running instead of fighting." "Are you happy now? With your husband, with your life?" "Happier than I've ever been. Adrian sees me in a way no one else ever has. And the business we've built together, it's challenging and fulfilling, and mine in a way nothing in New York ever was." "Your mother asks about you, Emily too. They want to know if you'll ever come home for a visit." Savannah thought about it carefully. She wasn't the same person who'd fled that wedding in Rome, and they weren't the same family who'd asked her to smile through her own heartbreak. Maybe enough time and distance had passed that they could find a new dynamic. "Maybe for Christmas," she said finally. "Just a visit, not to resume old patterns, but to see if we can build something new." The visit happened 6 months later. And it was exactly as complicated as Savannah had expected. Her mother was polite but distant, clearly struggling with Savannah's transformation into someone who didn't seek her approval. Emily was nervous and overly apologetic, desperately wanting absolution that Savannah wasn't ready to give. But there was also growth. When Emily started to make excuses about the wedding, Savannah stopped her gently. "I'm not interested in rehashing the past. What happened happened. If we're going to have a relationship going forward, it has to be based on who we are now, not who we were then." "Can you ever forgive me?" Emily asked, tears in her eyes. "I don't know. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm focused on building a life that doesn't revolve around family drama. You're my sister, and I don't hate you, but I also don't trust you the way I used to, and that's a consequence you'll have to live with." It wasn't the reconciliation Emily wanted, but it was honest. And honesty, Savannah had learned, was worth more than false peace. Marcus, mercifully, was visiting his parents and not present. Savannah suspected Emily had arranged it that way, and she was grateful. Some bridges were better left burned. Adrian joined her for the last dinner before they flew back to San Francisco, and watching him interact with her family was fascinating. He was polite, charming even, but there was an undercurrent of steel that made it very clear he would tolerate no disrespect toward Savannah. When Linda made a subtle comment about Savannah's weight, "You're looking healthy, dear," Adrian cut in smoothly. "She looks happy. That's what matters." And when Emily tried to probe about their business, asking in that particular way she had that was really judgment disguised as curiosity, Adrian simply said, "We're very successful. Savannah's brilliant at what she does. I'm lucky to have her as a partner." It was a masterclass in setting boundaries while maintaining civility, and Savannah fell in love with him all over again, watching him defend her without making it a fight. On the flight home, she asked him what he'd thought of her family. "They're exactly what you described. People who love you, but don't really see you. People who want you to fit into their idea of who you should be, rather than celebrating who you actually are." He took her hand. "I'm glad we visited, and I'm equally glad we're leaving." "Me too." 2 years after leaving Seoul, Savannah and Adrian had built an empire that looked nothing like his old one, and everything like what they'd both needed. Cross-consulting was profitable and respected, working with companies that wanted to expand globally while maintaining ethical standards. They had offices in San Francisco, Singapore, and Tokyo, and a client list that included Fortune 500 companies and promising startups alike. But more importantly, they had a life. They traveled for business, but always came home to each other. They built a network of friends who valued them for who they were rather than what they could provide. They created space for quiet evenings and passionate arguments and everything in between. And when Savannah discovered she was pregnant, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle she hadn't known she was building. "We're going to have a baby," she said, handing Adrian the test with shaking hands. He stared at it for a long moment, and when he looked up, his eyes were bright with emotion. "A baby. We're going to be parents." "Are you happy? We never really talked about whether we wanted kids." "I'm terrified and thrilled in equal measure, but yes, I'm happy. Incredibly happy." He pulled her close. "We're going to do this differently than our parents did. We're going to raise a child who knows they're enough exactly as they are, who never has to perform for love or shrink to make others comfortable." "We're going to screw it up sometimes," Savannah said. "All parents do." "Probably. But we'll apologize when we do, and we'll let them be whoever they need to be, even if it's nothing like what we expected." Their daughter was born on a sunny morning in San Francisco, with a full head of dark hair and eyes that saw everything. They named her Julia, after no one in particular, because she was entirely her own person from the moment she took her first breath. Watching Adrian hold their daughter for the first time, Savannah felt her heart overflow with the enormity of what they'd built. Not just a business or a marriage, but a whole new family built on choice and honesty and the kind of love that demanded everyone show up as their full selves. 3 years later, they stood together at the opening of the Hayes Cross Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping women escape toxic relationships and rebuild their lives. They'd funded it entirely themselves, pooling resources and connections to create something that might have helped Savannah if it had existed when she needed it. The foundation offered counseling, job training, temporary housing, and most importantly, a community of people who understood what it meant to feel invisible and were committed to making sure no one else felt that way. Savannah's father attended the opening, proud and tearful. Her mother sent flowers, but didn't come. Some bridges would never be fully repaired, and Savannah had made peace with that. Emily sent a generous donation and a card that said simply, "I'm proud of you." It wasn't everything, but it was something. At the end of the night, after all the guests had left and the speeches were over, Adrian found Savannah standing in the empty event space, Julia asleep against her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about that balcony in Rome, the night I called you. I was so lost and I had no idea that asking for help would lead here, to all of this." She looked around at the foundation offices, at the photos of women they'd already helped, at the future they were building. "Sometimes I can barely remember who I was before you. I remember. You were brave and brilliant and so convinced you were invisible that you'd nearly disappeared entirely." He wrapped his arms around both of them, his wife and daughter, his whole world. "I didn't change you, Savannah. I just gave you space to become who you were always meant to be." "We gave each other that space," she corrected. "You taught me to take up room. I taught you that vulnerability isn't weakness. We made each other better." "We did, and we're going to keep doing it. For ourselves, for Julia, for everyone who needs to know that being seen is possible." Savannah looked out the window at San Francisco glittering in the darkness. Somewhere out there were women standing on metaphorical balconies, feeling invisible and lost and convinced they had to accept whatever crumbs of love and respect came their way. And now, because of what she and Adrian had built, some of them would get a phone call or find a website or hear about a foundation that specialized in seeing people, really seeing them, and helping them become who they were meant to be. It wasn't the ending Savannah had imagined when she made that desperate call from Rome. It was better. Because she'd learned that the best endings weren't about rescue. They were about choosing yourself, over and over, until choosing yourself became so natural you couldn't imagine living any other way. "Ready to go home?" Adrian asked. Savannah adjusted their sleeping daughter and took her husband's hand. "Yeah, let's go home." And they did, together, the way they'd been doing everything since that night in Rome, when one woman had been brave enough to ask for help and one man had been brave enough to answer. The way they would keep doing for the rest of their lives, choosing each other, choosing honesty, choosing to be seen and to see each other completely. Because that, Savannah had learned, was what love actually looked like. Not the fairy tale her sister had stolen, not the performance her family had demanded, but the messy, complicated, absolutely real thing she'd built with Adrian, a love that didn't ask anyone to be smaller, but demanded they both be everything they were capable of becoming. And that was more than enough. It was everything.